Chapter 1184. I found out a part of it. Xing girl thought for a while and decided to answer according to what Xiao Chen had taught her before. I heard that he has a special skill called Saint Seiya. It seems like he can clear his mind and not accept anything fake. From cosmetic surgery to hypnotic illusions, they all have no effect on him. Really? Elder Son asked doubtfully. Is there such a powerful martial skill? Why haven't I heard of it before? There is. Today, he had a conflict with the Six Directions faction in the restaurant. I think he used this martial skill. After that, Elder Gu could only stare at him helplessly. No matter what you say, you can't fool him. He used this to defeat Elder Gu. Elder Son furrowed his brows. Why does this seem to be different from what Yu Dongxing described? Of course not, he also used another kind of martial skill. Little Miss Xing vividly said, I heard that this martial skill is called the Phoenix Illusory Demon Fist. What the hell is Phoenix? How can there be a martial skill with such a long name? Elder Son was stunned when he heard this. What the hell was this? There is. Xiao Chen relied on this Phoenix Illusory Demon Fist to kill Elder Gu, who was originally especially awesome and powerful. Miss Xing vowed solemnly, the scene at that time was extremely spectacular. The entire restaurant was densely packed with the fireballs that Xiao Chen released. Then, with a whoosh, he killed Elder Gu. That guy didn't even have a speck of dust left. Elder Son was dumbfounded. He felt that little Miss Xing's description of Xiao Chen was too miraculous. He didn't seem like a human anymore. Instead, he seemed like a god. Elder Son? Elder Son. Little Miss Xing exaggerated the scene in the restaurant several times. After hearing that there was no response from the other end of the phone, she tentatively shouted a few times. Elder Son, are you still there? Have I completed my mission? Can I return to the sect now? Oh, cough cough, not yet. Elder Son finally regained his senses. He pretended to cough twice and said, your investigation of Xiao Chen's martial skills is not thorough enough. You have to continue following him and obtain more accurate information. So it's like that. Xing girl curled her lips. I knew you would say that. Anyway, I don't want to go back to that foul open heaven gate. Elder Son suddenly thought of something and instructed in a low voice, yes, right. Don't run around randomly after you enter the Exalt secret realm. At that time, there will be an important mission for you to complete. Okay, what's the specific content of the mission? Little Miss Xing casually asked. I can't tell you for now. Someone will contact you when the time comes and tell you what to do. Elder Son's tone was a little serious. After all, Elder Son had lived for a long time and was very experienced. At this moment, he had already recovered from the shock of Xiao Chen's martial skills. He felt that little Miss Xing's words were a little inaccurate and was a little dissatisfied with her. But little Miss Xing acutely sensed the change in Elder Son's emotions. However, under the influence of a strong sense of curiosity, she really wanted to know what the mission was. What? Are you going to disobey my orders? Elder Son was already a little displeased. No. I just want to know about the mission earlier so that I can make some preparations in case it's too late. Little Miss Xing was afraid of arousing Elder Son's suspicions and swallowed her words. If Elder Son feels that it's not appropriate, I will definitely listen to you. That's good. There's no need to prepare in advance. When the time comes, you will naturally know what you have to do. Elder Son nodded his head in satisfaction and said slowly, before entering the Exalt secret realm, continue to investigate the situation of Xiao Chen's martial skills. Alright, that's all for now. After hanging up the phone, little Miss Xing originally wanted to immediately go over and tell Xiao Chen about the situation. However, when she reached the door, she turned around and walked back. It was already late at night. Little Miss Xing suddenly thought that Xiao Chen might be cultivating with a few women. It wasn't convenient for her to barge in, so she walked back halfway. She dispelled this thought. In any case, she had been spending most of her time with Xiao Chen, so there would be plenty of opportunities to talk about it. Just as the preparations for the Exalt Secret Realm were in full swing, the Immortal Cultivation faction and the Ghost Cultivation faction weren't idle either. They each sent out a large number of people to search for women with spiritual qi in the mortal world, the outer martial world, and even the inner martial world. However, although their goals were the same, the methods used by the two factions were poles apart. The Immortal Cultivation faction was relatively more civilized. If they found a suitable candidate, they would usually invite them to the inner martial world Song clan as a guest. Then, they would try to persuade them with emotion and reason, hoping that they would agree. Some people felt that the Immortal Cultivation faction was generous and had an optimistic attitude towards the uncertainties of the sacrificial ceremony, so they gladly accepted. However, for the sake of their own lives, most of them chose to refuse. The Immortal Cultivation faction didn't force them and instead sent them away. As for the Ghost Cultivation faction, they were much more barbaric. They would cast a net to catch people. As long as they found a suitable candidate, they wouldn't care if the other party was willing or not. In short, they would capture them and detain them. Then, they would threaten and bribe them, using all kinds of methods to force the other party to submit. Therefore, the Ghost Cultivation faction was a bit more effective than the Immortal Cultivation faction. In the mortal world Song Ning City, Hongzhu was resting in Li Xianer's home. After a rough calculation, Hongzhu realized that he had already been in the mortal world for more than a week. In this week, he had practically run through the entire Song Ning City. However, apart from Lu Shuangshuang, he hadn't met anyone else suitable. Hongzhu couldn't help but wonder, was his luck really that bad? Did he really have to go to the sacrificial ceremony himself? Sister Hongzhu, that Lu Shuangshuang hasn't contacted us since we last met. She didn't even go to the Warriors Guild to sell her binoculars. Could there be a problem? Li Xianer was cooking in the kitchen when she suddenly thought of Lu Shuangshuang. It can't be, right? I think she might not want to participate in the sacrificial ceremony, but she's too embarrassed to say it out loud. So, she simply hasn't contacted us. Hongzhu leaned on the sofa, curled his lips, and said helplessly, actually, this is very normal. Put yourself in her shoes and think about it. If it was me, I also wouldn't be willing to use my own life as the price in exchange for illusory benefits. This transaction is obviously not worth it. But in my opinion, Lu Shuangshuang doesn't seem like the kind of person who starts strong but ends weak. If she doesn't agree. Li Xianer shook her head and said as she walked out of the kitchen with a plate of stir-fried vegetables. Chapter 1185. Ring ring ring. Before Li Xianer could finish speaking, Hongzhu's cell phone on the table suddenly rang. Putting down the plate, Li Xianer looked down at the phone and said with a smile, "See, I told you she would call. Big sister Hongzhu, pick up and listen." Hongzhu was stunned for a moment. He casually took the phone and found that it was Lu Shuangshuang's name displayed on the screen. He was delighted and quickly pressed the answer button. He put the phone to his ear, and before Hongzhu could speak, a weak female voice came from the other end of the line. Excuse me, are you Lu Shuangshuang's friend, Miss Hong?" "Hongzhu?" "That's right, I'm Hongzhu. May I ask who you are?" Hongzhu was a little puzzled. This didn't seem to be Lu Shuangshuang's voice. What happened? Was Lu Shuangshuang sick? "Hi. Hello, I'm Lu Shuangshuang's best friend, Kerlin." Kerlin held the phone and bit her lower lip as she said timidly, "I'm looking for you to ask about Shuangshuang's whereabouts. May I ask, have you seen her recently?" "Recently? The last time I saw her was about a week ago." "What happened? Did something happen to her?" Hongzhu asked anxiously. He felt that something was wrong the more he listened. She She hasn't been home for 5 or 6 days, and she didn't take her phone with her. Kerlin gathered her courage and described in detail. Her grandmother thought that she was playing at my house, so she didn't pay much attention. It wasn't until I came to look for her today that I realized she was missing. I took the liberty of calling you because I left your business card on the table. How could this be? Where are you now? I'll rush over to find you immediately. We'll talk about the details when we meet. Hongzhu suddenly stood up. He couldn't care less about eating and ran out with the phone in one hand and Li Xianer in the other. On the other end of the phone, Kerlin's cautious voice came through. I live in Shantytown XX in the west of the city. Before Kerlin could finish speaking, Hongzhu had already flagged down a taxi. After telling the driver the address, she said to Kerlin on the phone, I'm already in the car. Don't leave yet. If there's anything, wait for me. After that, Hongzhu hung up the phone, took out 100 yuan from his wallet, and handed it to the driver, telling him to get to Shantytown as soon as possible. The driver was also puzzled. These two girls didn't look like poor people from the way they dressed. Why would he go to a poor place like Shantytown? Could it be to experience life? However, seeing how generous Hongzhu was, the driver did not intend to ask any more questions. After receiving the money, he stepped on the accelerator and sped toward the shanty town. Not long after, the taxi stopped near the slums. Hongzhu and Li Xianer had never been here before, so they had no choice but to follow the house numbers one by one. But what astonished Hongzhu was that the closer she got to Lu Shuangshuang's house, the more she had a strong feeling that there was actually a woman with weak spiritual energy hiding nearby. Excuse me. Are you Miss Hongzhu? Just as Hongzhu was concentrating on the house number, a beautiful, gentle, and weak little girl came over and greeted Hongzhu softly. I am. You're Lin Ke, right? Hongzhu turned his head, carefully glanced at Lin Ke, and said in an indifferent voice. At this time, she had discovered that the weak spiritual energy she had felt before was emitted from Kerlin. Yes, Miss Hongzhu, is this your friend? Kerlin nodded obediently and glanced at Li Xianer standing next to her. Yes, her name is Li Xianer, and she's my good, best friend. You don't have to be so polite. Just call me Hongzhu. Xian and I are ordinary people, not the daughters of some big family. Hongzhu replied with a smile. I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything by it, please don't misunderstand. Only then did Kerlin realize that miss was actually a very ambiguous word. Her face immediately turned red and she regretted being too rash. This big sister in front of her had a hot body and enchanting eyes. Would she mind this? It's all right, it's not something important. Hongzhu casually waved her hand. She could see that Kerlin's eyes were very clear and she was probably still inexperienced. Although she had called her miss, it was probably just out of courtesy. She didn't mind it that much. Kerlin let out a light sigh of relief. She rubbed the corner of her clothes and said apologetically, I'm sorry. I lost the house number to Shuangshuang's house. I was worried that you might not be able to find this place, so I specially came out to get you, the two of you. The house number here is a little hard to find. Hongzhu sized up Kerlin a few more times, feeling a little surprised. However, she didn't expose her. Instead, she calmly said, let's talk about Lu Shuangshuang. Before she disappeared, did she contact anyone? I looked through her phone just now. Because her last call was to you, I took the liberty to call you to ask. Kerlin lowered her head and took out Lu Shuangshuang's phone. She handed it over and pointed at the call log. She called me? Hongzhu took the phone with an astonished look on his face and muttered, she didn't call me before. What's going on? Hongzhu, who was full of doubts, looked through the call log on Lu Shuangshuang's phone. Aside from a call from Kerlin, Lu Shuangshuang had also called him a few days ago. Looking at the date of the call, it should be the night after he met her. This is too strange. I clearly didn't receive Lu Shuangshuang's call that day, so why is my number on the call log? Hongzhu frowned and took out his phone to check again. Sure enough, Lu Shuangshuang's call log from that day didn't show up. He definitely didn't miss it. Sister Hongzhu, could it be that at that time, Lu Shuangshuang had already made up her mind on that matter and wanted to give you a call, but something urgent cropped up at the last minute, so she hung up before the call could go through? That's why there's this record? Li Xianer thought for a while and analyzed softly. That's the only possibility. Hongzhu thought for a while, then turned to Kerlin and asked, who does Lu Shuangshuang usually live with? Shuangshuang usually lives with her grandmother. She's very filial and takes good care of her grandmother. Kerlin was a little nervous and stuttered. Then who was the last person to see her? Did that person notice anything out of the ordinary? Hongzhu continued to ask. Chapter 1186. Actually, I don't know much about her circle. She rarely talks about her personal affairs. Kerlin shook her head. She suddenly thought of something and continued, but when I asked Grandma, she mentioned that on the night Shuangshuang disappeared, she vaguely heard a girl calling her name outside the house. Girl? Who was it? Did you see her face? What kind of person is she? Hongzhu immediately grasped the key point. Unfortunately, Kerlin shook her head and said with a guilty expression, I didn't see it. Grandma thought it was me, so she didn't pay much attention. She's old, and she can't see people clearly. Kerlin was now very upset. Although she was Lu Shuangshuang's best friend, she had to help set up the stall at home besides going to school every day. She rarely had the chance to see Lu Shuangshuang. No matter how he thought about it, other than knowing that Shuangshuang was selling binoculars at the Warrior Guild, he knew nothing else. He felt that he was not qualified to be her best friend. Could it be that Lu Shuangshuang was kidnapped? I saw a Weibo post a while ago, saying that some people use the cries of children and women to commit crimes at night when the sky is dark. They've already succeeded in a few cases. What a scum! Li Xianer stomped her feet angrily and muttered to herself. She had finally found a girl with spiritual energy, but she didn't expect such an accident to happen. Li Xianer wanted to shout at the sky to vent the frustration in her heart. Kidnap. Kidnap. Kerlin pursed her lips and almost cried. She said with a terrified expression, then what should we do? Should we call the police? Kerlin couldn't understand. What was the point of kidnapping Lu Shuangshuang? She had no money or power like herself. Could it be that the other party was a rapist? So scary, so scary. Shuangshuang would be fine, right? Don't worry. Calling the police won't solve the problem now. Lu Shuangshuang might have just gone to another friend's house. How about this, you go back first. Xian and I are quite capable. We'll definitely find her. Hongzhu hurriedly comforted Kerlin. While comforting her, Hongzhu couldn't help but roll his eyes at Li Xianer. This girl's mouth was too chatty. Why did she have to mention kidnapping? Look at how scared this little girl is. All right then. With a pale face, Kerlin looked at Hongzhu hopefully and said, if you find Shuangshuang, can you please give me a call? I'm worried that something will happen to her. Kerlin also understood that there were some things that the police might not be able to handle. After all, Lu Shuangshuang had been missing for so many days. She was afraid that the golden time for rescue had long passed. Now, she could only hope that these two sisters in front of her with strong auras could find Shuangshuang. Good, then tell me your mobile number. When I find her, I'll inform you immediately. Hongzhu nodded and took out his mobile phone, preparing to record Kerlin's number. But I don't have a mobile phone. Kerlin stammered for a long time with a pitiful expression on her face. With her family's financial situation, how could she afford a mobile phone? Then take Lu Shuangshuang's mobile phone with you. Remember to charge it at all times and keep it connected. I can call you. Maybe she'll also call. Hongzhu was startled for a moment, then he handed Lu Shuangshuang's mobile phone over. Looking at Kerlin's thin figure and plain clothes, Hongzhu couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It seemed that Kerlin's family situation was very ordinary. Nowadays, which girl of her age didn't have a smartphone? No wonder she could only live in this dirty and dilapidated shantytown. Oh. If there's nothing else, I'll go home first. I'll leave Shuangshuang in your hands. Kerlin took the mobile phone and carefully put it away. Then, she turned around and left with her head lowered. No one knew what she was thinking, but she almost bumped into a telephone pole on the side of the road. Looking at Kerlin's dazed back, Hongzhu gave Li Xianer a look. Then, he used his movement technique and quietly followed Kerlin until he saw her enter a low bungalow. After ascertaining the location of her house, he stopped not far away. After being glared at by Hongzhu just now, Li Xianer didn't dare to speak carelessly along the way and obediently followed them. Seeing that Hongzhu had no intention of leaving, she asked in a low voice, "Big sis Hongzhu, why did you come back with Kerlin? Shouldn't we go find Lu Shuangshuang first?" "Naturally, I have my reasons." Hongzhu stared at the low and messy bungalow and explained in a low voice, "This Kerlin is also a suitable candidate. Moreover, she was born with a mysterious Yin constitution, which can increase the success rate of the sacrificial ceremony. However, I don't know why, but the spiritual energy in her body is being suppressed by a powerful murderous aura. She can't use it, so I wanted to come and take a look." When he met Kerlin before, Hongzhu had already noticed this problem, but he had kept it to himself. Looking at Kerlin's appearance, she probably didn't know what was wrong with her constitution. Originally, when Hongzhu was chatting with Kerlin, he wanted to tell her the ins and outs of the matter and convince her to participate in the sacrificial ceremony. However, considering Lu Shuangshuang's sudden disappearance, Hongzhu was worried that this might affect Lin Kuer's judgment. Furthermore, this little lass looked weak and timid, and was rather cautious. She probably wouldn't easily trust someone she had just met for the first time. So, after thinking about it, Hongzhu decided to temporarily give up on this idea. He decided to observe for a while and also find Lu Shuangshuang's whereabouts. It can't be, right? Such a coincidence? Li Xian was a little surprised and asked, "But what did you mean by her murderous aura just now?" To put it simply, she's a big jinx. No matter who comes into contact with her, they'll be out of luck for a while. Hongzhu shook his head and said, "Unless that person has a strong ability to resist the murderous aura, or as the saying goes, a tough life, they won't be affected by the murderous aura." In fact, Hongzhu wasn't very clear about the specifics of the murderous aura. He had only vaguely seen a black aura shrouding the space between Kerlin's eyebrows, so he was able to deduce it from the knowledge he already had. Is that true? I think we also came into contact with her just now. Will we be out of luck as well? Li Xian, her shoulders suddenly slumped as if she was deflated. She sighed helplessly and said, "However, it seems that we're already starting to run out of luck, otherwise, Lu Shuangshuang wouldn't have mysteriously disappeared. That's not because of her. When I said that I came into contact with her, I meant the more intimate kind. If it was just ordinary communication, she wouldn't have been." Before Hongzhu could finish speaking, he suddenly felt the phone in his pocket vibrate a few times. He quickly took it out and looked at it. A strange expression instantly appeared on his face. Chapter 1187. Looking at the two big words, Hong Yen, on the screen, Hongzhu hesitated for a moment before pressing the answer button. He walked to the side and lightly said, "Hong Yen, what's the matter?" "Well, Hongzhu, is everything going well on your side? I've encountered a small situation here." Hong Yan's tone was also very flat. Although her voice was soft, it didn't have the slightest emotion. It sounded like she was talking to a stranger. It's not bad. I've found 2 women with spiritual energy. What happened on your side? You couldn't have messed up the mission, right? Hong Zhu curled his lips and teased with a grin. I don't want to quarrel with you. I'm just calling to remind you to keep an eye on the women you've found. 2 of my people have gone missing. I speculate that it might be the work of the ghost cultivation sect. Hong Yan didn't respond and coldly said. What? 2 people have gone missing? Hong Zhu frowned and finally realized the seriousness of the problem. He put away the smile on his face and said in a heavy voice, I also have 1 missing. According to what you said, it should also be the work of the ghost cultivation sect. It seems that our situation is the same. The ghost cultivation sect is really fast. Hong Yan's heart sank as she muttered. But, how can they still have people in the secular world? Hong Zhu pondered for a moment and said with a puzzled expression, if I remember correctly, weren't they cleaned up by the Song family? Song Qingshu also thought so at that time. But it turns out that there are still disciples of the ghost cultivation sect in the secular world. Hong Yan slightly sighed and said, and not only in the secular world, but also in the outer martial world. I've found 2 women in Tianfang province and the Devil Star sect with great difficulty, but now their whereabouts are unknown. Outer martial world? The ghost cultivation sect is really like a centipede, dying but not falling down. We have swept through them time and time again, but we have not been able to exterminate them. Hong Zhu hatefully said. That's the specific situation. Hong Yan warned again, Hong Zhu, you'd better keep an eye on the remaining woman. Don't let them have their way again. I know, you don't need to repeatedly remind me, I will naturally do that. Is there anything else? Hong Zhu asked coldly, a little impatient. No one spoke on the other end of the line, but the sound of rapid breathing could be heard. It was obvious that Hong Yan had been angered by Hong Zhu's cold and indifferent attitude. However, Hong Yan quickly calmed down. After pondering for a moment, she calmly said, Elder sister, the immortal cultivation sect has reached a critical juncture. It would be better for you to reconsider and participate in the sacrificial ceremony. Oh, you're finally willing to acknowledge me as your sister? I thought you would never call me sister again in this lifetime. At this moment, Hong Zhu's mood was somewhat complicated. She couldn't tell if she was happy or sad, but she could feel her eyes gradually moistening. Since we are related by blood, I won't deny it. Hong Yan's voice also trembled a little. She took a deep breath and changed the topic. Sister, think about it carefully. If the ghost cultivation sect is 1 step ahead of us and enters the immortal cultivation world, I'm afraid the consequences will be unimaginable. Hong Zhu's emotions were stuck in his throat and he didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, his expression gradually turned cold. He clenched his teeth and sneered. Hee, in the end, you're still only thinking about the interests of the family. Elder sister. Hong Yan had just called out when Hong Zhu ruthlessly said, I admit that I'm not as great as you. Since there are others who can replace me, why must I be the sacrifice? Elder sister, you don't need to mock and ridicule me. I'm not as great as you say. Hong Yan's voice also became agitated. In any case, we were born in such a family and can't decide our own fate, so why should we make things difficult for others? Make things difficult? Did we burn, kill, plunder, rob, or threaten others? Hong Zhu immediately retorted. We only let others participate in the sacrificial ceremony when they are willing. How is this making things difficult? This is called taking what we need. But this is only our family's matter. Isn't it a little too cruel to let a few innocent outsiders bear this responsibility? Hong Yan's tone was somewhat angry. My dear younger sister, you've used the wrong word again. Where does cruelty come from? Hong Zhu sneered. Not to mention that the sacrificial ceremony might not necessarily cost their lives, we've already given them enough in return. This is purely a transaction. But under the current circumstances, do you still have time to slowly make a transaction with others? Hong Yan was also a little unable to suppress her emotions. She angrily said, if the ghost cultivation sect enters the immortal cultivation world in advance, have you ever thought about how much harm it will cause to the common people? The ghost cultivation sect is so morally bankrupt and does all kinds of evil. How much blood will it bring about? It seems that our values are still different. Hongzhu repeatedly shook his head. Unwilling to be outdone, he retorted, do you think that the family wants to open the immortal cultivation world just to curb the development of the ghost cultivation sect? If the immortal cultivation sect doesn't want to obtain the resources and strength in the immortal cultivation world, they just need to focus their energy on the ghost cultivation sect and do their best to eliminate them in advance. Why do they still need to spend so much manpower and resources to enter the immortal cultivation world? This is the fate of the family. Since we're juniors, we naturally have no right to ask or resist. You should know that. Hong Yan replied as if it was a matter of course. Before Hong Yan could finish speaking, Hongzhu became angry and impatiently interrupted, enough. You don't need to use the family's way to educate me. In short, I'm not willing to exchange my life for the interests of that family. That's it. As soon as his voice faded, Hongzhu directly hung up the phone and his complexion turned very unsightly. Every time he talked to his obedient little sister on the phone, it would always end up as if they were quarreling. Although the two of them didn't have any substantial conflicts, they couldn't coexist in some aspects. This made Hongzhu very unhappy, so he usually wouldn't take the initiative to contact Hong Yan. In the eyes of everyone in the Hong family, Hong Yan was always that gentle and obedient girl. No matter what kind of mission the family gave her, she would carry it out without any hesitation. Even when it came to risking her life to become a sacrifice, Hong Yan had never said a single word of objection. Although they were sisters, Hongzhu's personality was worlds apart from Hong Yan's. In the eyes of the family, she was synonymous with rebellious. Ever since she was young, Hongzhu had disregarded the Hong family's objections and insisted on learning the art of charm. She had even caused a huge ruckus in the family, refusing to become a sacrifice for opening the immortal cultivation world no matter what. She would rather sneak into the secular world or the martial world and rely on her own strength to find other suitable candidates. Chapter 1188. The members of the family had originally been very angry at Hongzhu's disregard for the bigger picture, but they had not expected that after reporting it to the patriarch, not only would he not stop her, he would even encourage Hongzhu's actions. Not only did the patriarch verbally encourage her, he had even specially invited Song Qingshu of the Song family to go to the secular world to help take care of the evil cultivator disciples. Moreover, he had established a Hongying team specifically for Hongzhu to protect her and gather information. Although it was said that the clan's interests were above all else, Hongzhu had already proposed a solution. Since she did not want to become a sacrifice herself, as long as she could use the appropriate method to find a suitable candidate who could take her place, Patriarch Hong would not have any complaints against her. The actions of the old patriarch caused the Hong family members to change their attitude towards Hongzhu. Normally, they would treat her with more respect. However, there was still one person, and that was her younger sister, Hong Yan, who still strongly disapproved of her actions. Hong Yan believed that since Hongzhu was the successor of an immortal cultivation sect, she must have a sense of duty to sacrifice herself for the family. She had not expected that not only would Hongzhu find an outsider to replace her position, she would even learn some heretical art of seduction. This was simply a disgrace to the Hong family. However, although she disapproved of Hongzhu's actions, the two of them had grown up together and shared a deep and intimate relationship. Hong Yan's trust and dependence on Hongzhu had not diminished because of this. The real reason why the two women were so incompatible and at odds with each other was actually because of Xiaofan. Previously, when Hong Yan had helped out at the pharmacy, it was all because of Xiao Chen's careless words that she had thought that Xiao Chen was a lecher and a pervert. Moreover, because Hong Yan had never mentioned this little secret to anyone else, every time she recalled this matter, her impression of Xiao Chen would become even worse. In the end, when Hong Yan was not around, in order to investigate Xiao Chen's strength, Hong Zhu had not hesitated to use a seduction art to seduce him. When Hong Yan found out about this, her impression of her older sister became extremely bad, as if she had swallowed a fly. Because of this insignificant matter, the two sisters grew increasingly disagreeable, and the conflict between them grew more and more intense. In the end, the two women had a huge argument in front of the elders of the family. Although Hong Yan and Hong Zhu had been pacified at the time, the relationship between Hong Yan and Hong Zhu had gradually drifted apart after that, and their interactions had become less and less frequent. Hong Zhu stared at her phone and sighed softly. In truth, why would she and Hong Yan have such a deep grudge against each other? The two of them were connected by blood and should have been the most intimate of relationships. Who would have thought that it would turn out like this? Cough cough, that. Sister Hong Zhu, it's getting dark, what are we waiting for here? Seeing that Hong Zhu had finished his call, Li Xian pretended to look up at the sky and pretended to cough twice. Although Hong Zhu had already walked some distance away, a few words still fell into Li Xian's ear. Li Xian was indeed a little curious as to why Hong Zhu and her sisters would have such an unpleasant quarrel, but she did not dare to ask too many questions. After all, this was a family matter, and it was not appropriate for outsiders to get involved. As such, she could only change the subject. Hong Zhu regained his composure and said with a solemn expression, I just received news that the ghost cultivation sect is also competing with us for women with spiritual energy in the secular world. It is very likely that Lu Shuangshuang was captured by them. What? The ghost cultivation sect? Li Xianer was shocked. After pondering for a while, she looked at the bungalow and said, since that's the case, shouldn't we speed up? How about we go and ask that Kerlin now and see if she's willing to become a sacrifice? Looking at the situation here, I feel that her family shouldn't be very well off. As long as we spend a bit more money, I think she will definitely agree. Not for the time being. Hong Zhu had already returned to normal at this time. He stared at Kerlin's residence and said, there's something strange about this matter. If we rashly go in, not only will Kerlin not believe our words, she will also suspect that we were the ones who kidnapped Lu Shuangshuang. Then what should we do? If we don't act now, it will be too late when the ghost cultivation sect comes looking for us. Li Xianer asked with a frown. That's exactly what we want. Hong Zhu raised his eyebrows and coldly said, if Lu Shuangshuang was really kidnapped by the ghost cultivation sect, that means that Kerlin is also in danger. Therefore, I plan to stay here for a few days and see who the other party is. If everything goes smoothly, we can also use this opportunity to rescue Lu Shuangshuang. Li Xianer excitedly waved her small fist and said, that's great. I've long wanted to teach those despicable ghost cultivation sect a lesson, but I've never had the chance to meet them. Halfway through her words, Li Xianer's stomach issued a goo-goo sound. She hastily covered her stomach in embarrassment. Only then did she remember that she hadn't had the time to finish her meal when Kerlin called her to come here. Hee, I'm also a bit hungry. You stay here and keep an eye on them. I'll go out and buy something to eat. Hong Zhu faintly smiled and stretched his waist in a charming manner. He glanced around and then walked towards the convenience store at the entrance of the slum area. Late at night, most of the households in the slum area had already turned off their lights and slept. Only a few houses still had a faint light on, and one of them was Kerlin's room. Originally, Kerlin wouldn't sleep so late, but she was now a freshman. In addition to attending classes on time during the day, she also had to help her family set up the stall in her spare time. It was inevitable that she couldn't keep up with the progress of her studies. She didn't want to fall behind others, so she took advantage of the night to revise for a while. After earnestly doing a few exercises, Kerlin raised her head and looked at the time. Seeing that it was almost 12 o'clock, she closed her textbook and went out to take a bath. When she returned to her room and was about to turn off the light to sleep, she suddenly saw a black shadow flashing outside the window. "WH. Who is it?" Kerlin was suddenly shocked. She had heard that several households in the slum area had been robbed recently. According to the investigation, the thieves had quietly sneaked in through the windows in the middle of the night after the people in the bungalows had fallen asleep. Since the buildings in slum area were basically bungalows, and Kerlin's house was on the first floor, and the windows of her house had an old-fashioned lock that had been used for decades. Now, it was dilapidated, so they could only use a bolt. So, once a thief targeted her, it was easy for them to enter the room. "Ku'er, it's Shuang. You haven't slept yet, right? Hurry up and open the window. I'm in trouble." Kerlin had just plucked up the courage to ask when Lu Shuang's voice came from outside the window. It sounded a little hoarse. "Shuang? It's you. Where did you go? Your grandmother and I were worried to death." Kerlin was delighted and quickly ran over. Just as she was about to open the window, her hand suddenly paused. Chapter 1189. What's wrong? Open the window for me. Lu Shuang saw Kerlin's silhouette standing in front of the window, so she quickly reached out and knocked on the window. Kerlin quickly retracted her hand that was about to open the window. She whispered cautiously, I can't open the window for you yet. Unless you answer a few questions of mine and let me confirm your identity." "What? What kind of joke is this? I am the real Lu Shuang. Can't you open the window now? I really have something important to discuss with you." Lu Shuang's silhouette paced back and forth outside the window. She was clearly getting impatient. "No. Unless you can answer my questions correctly, I will never open the window." Lu Shuang's abnormal behavior deepened the doubt in Kerlin's heart. She immediately asked, Shuang, let me ask you, when did we meet?" "We were." "Ah. Don't come near me. Kur, save me." Lu Shuang let out a scream of fear before she could answer the question. Hearing Lu Shuang's scream, Kerlin was shocked. She looked out the window and saw a few more silhouettes. They seemed to be pulling Lu Shuang. Kerlin was dumbfounded. She couldn't care less and quickly reached out to open the latch. But when she opened the window a little, a wisp of black fog that was hard to see with the naked eye quietly floated in through the gap. "Hee, I didn't think you were so smart. You're much harder to fool than that little girl Lu Shuang." A wretched voice rang out. Kerlin felt the window being pushed with great force. She couldn't help but take 2 steps back. The black figure outside the window directly pushed open the window and jumped into the room. You're not Lu Shuang. Kerlin saw the black figure and was about to shout for help. Suddenly, she felt her brain go dizzy. Then, she lost all her strength and fell to the ground. Before she fainted, Lin Kur saw an incomparably ugly man. His body was constantly emitting a black fog, and he was slowly walking towards her with complacent steps. TSK, little girl, you're quite pretty. It's a pity that master doesn't allow me to touch you. Otherwise, I'll let you have a good taste of what it's like to die." The vulgar man stared greedily at Kerlin's exquisite body. He unconsciously stuck out his tongue and licked his lips with a lecherous look. "Stupid girl. Why are you quarreling in the middle of the night? Hurry up and go to sleep. Did you forget that you still have class tomorrow?" Outside the room, Kerlin's mother walked over in a daze, knocked on the door, and asked loudly with dissatisfaction. The vulgar man furrowed his brows. He felt that he shouldn't stay here for long. It would be troublesome if he was discovered. He made a prompt decision, picked up the unconscious Kerlin, and jumped out of the window in a flash, disappearing into the boundless night. Bang! Seeing that Lin didn't respond for a long time, Lin's mother vigorously pushed the door open, but what she saw was only a gradually dissipating black mist, an empty room, and two swaying open windows. Her daughter was nowhere to be seen. Not good. Old man, don't sleep, our Kuer is gone. After standing there in a daze for a long time, Mother Lin finally reacted. She immediately turned pale with fright and ran to her room while screaming. Carrying Lin on his back, he quickly shuttled through the shanty town. The vulgar man didn't seem to feel her weight at all. He ran a few kilometers effortlessly, and looked back from time to time to see if anyone would follow him. It wasn't until the vulgar man entered a dense forest that he felt that no one should be following him that he slowed down and continued to walk forward leisurely. After walking for another 10 minutes, the vulgar man came to the front of two broken wooden houses. He first pushed open the door of one of the wooden houses, shut Lin in, and carefully locked her with a chain. After confirming that everything was fine, he tiptoed out of the wooden house. "You damn lecher, you run quite fast. If it weren't for my strength, I'm afraid that you would have succeeded today." The vulgar man had just stepped out of the door when he heard a charming voice suddenly ring out, and he was suddenly shocked. Looking up, the vulgar man found that under the moonlight not far away, there were two beautiful women standing in the dense forest, staring at him. The vulgar man's eyes immediately lit up. These two women were both stunners. Moreover, they each had their own merits. One of them was dressed like a Taoist nun, and she had an air of arrogance. Although she looked very young, her figure was exquisite, and she had an awe-inspiring and inviolable temperament. And the other one should be the woman who had just spoken to him. This woman's temperament was a notch higher than the one beside her. Her eyes were coquettish, her figure was curvy, and her skin was fair. Although she looked like she had been through a lot, she was extremely attractive, and people couldn't help but want to love her. With the moonlight sprinkling down from the top of the forest, the two women's faces were even more beautiful. The vulgar man stared straight at the two women's delicate bodies, and he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. "What are you looking at? Damn lecher. Believe it or not, I'll dig out your eyeballs and throw them to the side of the road to feed the dogs." Li Xian's long, shapely eyebrows raised, and she angrily scolded. The vulgar man's eyes kept going back and forth between her and Hongzhu, and he even glanced at some private parts of their bodies. His greedy and lustful gaze made Li Xian feel very uncomfortable. Previously, Li Xian and Hongzhu had been squatting outside Lin's house in the slums, and they had witnessed the vulgar man taking Lin away. Li Xian had wanted to immediately come to her rescue, but she was stopped by Hongzhu in time. The whole process of this guy using Lu Shuangshuang as a cover to deceive Lin was heard by Hongzhu without missing a word. She immediately deduced that Lu Shuangshuang should have also been taken away by this vulgar man. Therefore, she didn't immediately make a move, but quietly followed him. She wanted to use this opportunity to find the melon by following the vine and rescue Lu Shuangshuang as well. Fortunately, Li Xian was also a cultivator, and she could release her divine sense. She followed the vulgar man from afar, so he didn't notice her. When they saw him enter the wooden house and settle Lin down, the two women looked at each other and felt that the time had come. They no longer hid, and both stood out. "Yo, this chick's temper is quite fierce. But it doesn't matter, I like to tame wild horses the most." Sun Abayo didn't care about Li Xian scolding at all. He grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. "I've heard too much of your mouth." Hongzhu curled her lips and sneered, "Don't just stand there and enjoy yourself. If you have the ability, why don't you come over and try taming her?" Chapter 1190. "If you want to come, Sun Abayo, have many tricks up my sleeves. I guarantee that your soul will soar to the heavens." Sun Abayo slowly walked over, rubbing his palms together as he looked at the two of them, salivating as he muttered, "Heh heh, I didn't think that my luck would be so good today." There are actually 2 such exquisite goods that have delivered themselves to my doorstep. Shameless. Despicable. Scum. Li Xian looked at Sun Abayo with disgust as she mercilessly insulted him. Thank you for your praise. Sun Abayo shamelessly licked his lips, then suddenly froze for a moment. He narrowed his eyes as he carefully examined Hongzhu, a happy expression appearing on his face as he said, I didn't think that your body would also have spiritual energy. Waha, it seems that today's trip was really worth it. So you also have this kind of ability, no wonder you were able to find Lu Shuangshuang and Kerlin. Hongzhu finally understood the reason and coldly said, but everything ends here. Don't even think about taking them away alive. So you've finally told me your goal? Sun Abayo didn't seem surprised at all and instead smiled wickedly. Unfortunately, I don't want to stop here, I still want to have some fun with you beauties. Hongzhu saw that Sun Abayo seemed to be on guard and inwardly cursed. She immediately activated her cultivation technique and displayed the strength of a peak 5th layer demon general, the corners of her mouth curling up as she suddenly revealed a soul-stirring smile. Sun Abayo didn't even have time to react before he saw Hongzhu's enchanting smile. His eyes immediately stared blankly, feeling as if the entire world had brightened because of her smile. Hongzhu's cherry lips parted slightly as she said in an extremely seductive voice, Little foolish K, don't you think elder sister is beautiful? Come and play with elder sister for a while. Li Xian was standing next to Hongzhu, so she didn't see her smile, but when she heard Hongzhu's voice, she couldn't help but feel her heart flutter. Even though Hongzhu's voice wasn't directed at her, Li Xian was still nearly unable to bear the aftershock. If the others were already in such a state, Sun Abayo, who was directly facing Hongzhu, was even more unbearable. His expression was absent-minded and a certain part of his body was about to explode as he spread his arms wide towards Hongzhu and leapt towards her with soulless eyes, muttering, All right. I'm coming over. Sister, wait for me. When Li Xian heard Sun Abayo's voice that sounded like a broken gong, she suddenly quivered and sobered up. She turned her head around and shot a surprised look at Hongzhu. She was still puzzled, wondering what was going on with Hongzhu. Why was he acting up for no reason? At this moment, Li Xian couldn't care less anymore. She whispered, Sister Hongzhu, there's no need to talk so much with him. Just let me chop this scum to death with my palm. Hearing Li Xian's words, Hongzhu's expression did not change. He continued to stare at Sun Abayo, but his finger moved slightly and he lightly pointed at Li Xian. Seeing Hongzhu's strange behavior, Li Xian was slightly taken aback. She suddenly realized that Hongzhu was not fooling around with her, but was using a charm technique. And she pointed at him, indicating for him to attack with all his strength. Li Xian immediately turned her head and saw that Sun Abayo was completely captivated and defenseless. She knew that this was the best time for her to attack, so she revealed the strength of the peak of level 9 of the Qi refinement stage. Then, she flew towards Sun Abayo and attacked him with all her strength. Boom! Li Xian's palm wind slapped Sun Abayo's body firmly, sending him flying backward and directly smashing into the wooden house not far behind him, making a loud crackling sound. Humph! This kind of trash scum can't even withstand a single blow. With just this bit of ability, he still has the nerve to come out and make a fool of himself? Li Xian said disdainfully as she folded her arms across her chest. After waiting for a while and seeing that there was no movement from the wooden house, Li Xian took a step forward and prepared to go to another wooden house to save the others. However, she had only taken one step when she was pulled back by Hongzhu. Wait, he's still alive. Hongzhu pointed at the wooden house with a solemn expression. Li Xian turned her head and saw that although no one had come out of the house, a black mist was gradually spreading out from the house. Seeing this, Li Xian couldn't help but frown. Before she could release her divine sense to investigate the situation inside the house, the black mist suddenly and rapidly expanded, instantly enveloping the entire small wooden house. The color of the black mist was extremely dark, making it impossible to see what was happening inside the wooden house. After a while, a blurry figure slowly emerged from the black mist. The two women were inwardly shocked as they focused all of their attention and vigilance. It didn't take long before the figure revealed its true appearance. It was Sun Abayo, who had an extremely furious expression on his face. The strange black mist behind Sun Abayo rapidly shrank as it continuously surged into Sun Abayo's body. It didn't take long for all the black mist in the wooden house to be absorbed into Sun Abayo's body. In addition to this, there was also some extremely dark black mist swirling around Sun Abayo's body, making him look extremely sinister and terrifying. "You two stinking bitches. You actually dared to use such a despicable trick to sneak attack me. Just watch how I kill you." Sun Abayo was clearly enraged. With a furious roar, the black mist around his body began to squirm as if it had a mind of its own. Hongzhu's expression was very serious. It was obvious that he was somewhat fearful of Sun Abayo's abilities. However, Sun Abayo did not wait for the two women to react. He instantly pushed the black mist around his body to its limit, opened his palms, and pounced forward like a bat. As he pounced forward with a sinister expression, Sun Abayo shouted in a low voice, "Flower-destroying demon palm. Li Xian, get out of the way. We're no match for him." Hongzhu immediately turned pale with fright. Although this Sun Abayo looked extremely ugly and only had the cultivation of a fifth-layer evil general, the power that he exuded was far higher than that of an ordinary cultivator. Evil cultivators were extremely unscrupulous in their cultivation methods. For example, they would use the fresh blood of someone who had just died to cultivate, or they would use corpse poison and corpse qi to cultivate, and so on. It was precisely because they were unscrupulous in their cultivation that they would not hesitate to harm ordinary people. As a result, the abilities that they cultivated were also extremely sinister. Ordinary cultivators of the same level or even slightly higher cultivation levels would not be able to withstand their attacks. Even though evil cultivators were existences that everyone wanted to kill, it was precisely because of the treacherous nature of their martial arts and mental cultivation methods that they were able to succeed time and time again when facing ordinary cultivators. Furthermore, Sun Abayo cultivated the latrine poison, which was extremely corrosive. An ordinary person would not be able to withstand it at all. After Hongzhu gave a loud roar, he reflexively dodged to the side, barely dodging the black mist. Then, he immediately turned his head to look at Li Xian. Unfortunately, Li Xian was not so lucky. Although she had already heard Hongzhu's warning, she was still unable to dodge in time, and her right leg was directly struck by the black mist. Chapter 1191. Ah! It hurts. Li Xian cried out in alarm. The moment the black mist swept past her, the pants on her right leg had been corroded into nothingness. Her calf was a bloody mess and the wound was extremely deep. The toxicity of this black mist was simply too powerful. If Li Xian had not immediately used her Yuan Qi to protect her body after hearing Hongzhu's words, her right leg would probably have been crippled by now. Heh, now you know pain. Weren't you pretty awesome when you attacked me just now? Sun Abayo arrogantly raised his chin and looked disdainfully at the deathly pale Li Xian, and Hongzhu. TSK, and you say I'm scum, that I can't withstand a single blow? I don't think you two are any better. Cut the crap. You actually used such a vicious move, you must have harmed many ordinary people. Of course you're scum. You're dust that can't even be considered a human. Dust. Li Xian gritted her teeth and glared at Sun Abayo. Heh, it seems that you have quite a bit of strength. You've even come up with a new way to curse people. Sun Abayo sneered, the black mist surrounding his body suddenly thickening. Li Xian's complexion paled. She had not expected Sun Abayo to still have a trick up his sleeve. Hongzhu's complexion flickered between green and white. His eyes flickered unpredictably as if he was fiercely thinking about something. Sun Abayo admired Li Xian's flustered appearance with satisfaction. His shifty eyes swept over her exquisite body and he said with a despicable smile, "Little fairy ant, don't be so afraid. If you promise to play with me for a few days, maybe I'll be kind and spare your life. How about it? Play with you my ass. Go to hell." Li Xian was instantly enraged. Forcefully enduring the pain in her right leg, she gathered Yuan Qi in her palms and fiercely slapped at Sun Abayo. "Yo, I thought that little fairy ant was very powerful. I didn't expect you to only have this much ability." Sun Abayo chuckled and stood in place without dodging, allowing Li Xian's palm wind to strike him. After all, Li Xian's strength was simply too low. She was unable to cause any harm to Sun Abayo. If Sun Abayo had not been bewitched by Hongzhu, Li Xian would not have been able to even get close to him. Seeing that her palm strike with all her strength seemed to have no effect on Sun Abayo, Li Xian's face finally showed an expression of despair. Was she really going to lose her innocence that she had guarded for more than 10 years here today? Think of a way to rescue Kerlin and Lu Shuangshuang. Leave this little fool to me. Hongzhu suddenly said in a deep voice. Li Xian and Sun Abayo both turned their heads to look and saw Hongzhu take out a small porcelain bottle from his bosom. He opened the cork and hesitated for a moment before his expression gradually turned resolute. He raised his head and drank the medicine inside in one gulp. Little slut, you've already started drinking your medicine? Sun Abayo winked and teased, but you're right, a strong man like me definitely has some abilities that surpass ordinary people. If you don't use some medicine, I'm afraid you won't be able to stand it after a few rounds. Who knows, you might even cry and beg for mercy. Ha ha ha. Sun Abayo felt that Hongzhu was just too alluring. Even if she was a woman with spiritual energy and was the target of his mission, he still couldn't help but want to go 300 rounds with her. This kind of unparalleled temptation was something he had never felt from any other woman. Originally, Sun Abayo's master, Old Man Shishan, knew that Sun Abayo's lust was too great and had repeatedly warned Sun Abayo that he was not allowed to touch women with spiritual energy. But now that he had seen such a stunningly beautiful woman, Sun Abayo couldn't care less. Sun Abayo had already made up his mind. In any case, his master had gone on a long journey. After he finished playing with Hongzhu, he would kill that person and erase all traces, pretending that he had never found this person. This way, his master wouldn't be able to find out. Little fool, don't be impatient. You're so tall and mighty, so you should let big sister prepare, right? Hongzhu finished drinking the medicine, threw the small bottle away, and charmingly winked at Sun Abayo. Since big sister has said so, how could I not agree? Sun Abayo looked at Hongzhu, whose eyes and brows were full of charm, and felt his lower abdomen heat up. He licked his lips and said, "When will big sister be ready? I can't wait any longer. If you delay any longer, I can't guarantee that I will punish you." At this time, it had already been a while since she had drunk the medicine. Hongzhu's lips and eyes had gradually turned a pinkish purple, and a faint purple mist was also emitting from her body. She sweetly smiled at Sun Abayo, then hooked her finger and said, "Big sister is ready, little fool, hurry up and come over. Even big sister can't help it anymore." Stupid big sister, do you think that this kind of low-level seduction technique will still work on your little brother? Although Sun Abayo said this, his lower body still very obediently propped up a small tent. However, Sun Abayo still didn't relax his vigilance. While he was fully on guard, he neared Hongzhu with an evil smile on his face. "Little brother, you're walking so slowly. If big sister waits too long, her mood won't be good." Hongzhu saw that Sun Abayo's steps were slow and anxious, so she purposely pouted, puffed up her cheeks, and acted cute. "What's the rush, big sister? Little brother is coming." Sun Abayo finally arrived in front of Hongzhu, his eyes burning with passion as he stretched his hand straight towards her chest. But before Sun Abayo's hands could touch Hongzhu's body, the faint purple mist around Hongzhu's body suddenly moved as if it had a mind of its own. It quickly left Hongzhu's body and wrapped around Sun Abayo's arms. Before Sun Abayo could react, the faint purple mist had already spread over his body, and then it took the opportunity to drill into his nostrils. This is... Sun Abayo was instantly dumbfounded. In a panic, he hurriedly mobilized the demonic energy in his body to resist, but he didn't expect that the black mist around his body was completely unable to disperse the faint purple mist. Instead, it was tightly wrapped around his body, unable to resist at all. In truth, Sun Abayo's actual combat experience was far too lacking, so he didn't know that the medicine that Hongzhu had taken was an extremely precious strengthening agent that could greatly enhance her seduction technique for a short period of time. Although Hongzhu's strength seemed to still be at the peak of the 5th layer of demonic cultivation, and there was no difference from before, her seduction technique had been raised to a whole new level. If she wanted to control Sun Abayo's mind, it would be a simple matter. But from the start, Hongzhu didn't plan on using the medicine to increase her strength. Although this medicine could temporarily enhance her seduction technique, it would also come at a price. It would completely drain the demonic energy in her body. Chapter 1192. The reason for this was very simple. This kind of enhancer was similar to the stimulants used in sports competitions. When taken, it could greatly enhance a person's bodily functions. However, after the efficacy of the drug waned, the person's internal organs would be greatly damaged. Moreover, it was very likely that the person would become addicted to the drug and suffer from incurable side effects. However, the current situation was critical. Hongzhu could not just watch as Sun Abayo violated Li Xian, nor could she use her weak strength to control him. After thinking it over, she could only take a risk and use the enhancer to increase the effects of the charm technique in an attempt to buy enough time. The light purple mist quickly invaded Sun Abayo's brain. Sun Abayo, who was still trying to resist, suddenly felt his vision blur. He saw that Hongzhu was wearing a transparent sand-like nightgown, which vividly displayed her curvaceous figure. Moreover, she even struck all kinds of seductive poses and whispered sweet nothings to Sun Abayo, flirting with him, causing him to feel his blood boil. When Sun Abayo saw this, he immediately threw all thoughts of resisting the purple mist to the back of his mind. He quickly took off his clothes and impatiently rushed over, hugged Hongzhu, and let out a low growl from time to time. My God, doesn't this damned scum feel pain? He's actually hugging a piece of wood. Li Xian, who was squatting to the side and unable to keep up with the rhythm, was a little dazed as she muttered to herself in extreme shock. At this time, in front of her, the naked Sun Abayo was doing his best to exercise a large piece of wood with an extremely comfortable expression on his face. The impact of this scene was too great. Li Xian was so shocked that she almost forgot about the injury on her leg. She hurriedly turned her head away, afraid that she would get a pinprick, completely unable to understand what was going on. But after turning her head around, Li Xian suddenly discovered that Hongzhu was standing in the same place with full concentration, motionlessly staring at Sun Abayo. Hongzhu's entire body was wrapped in a pale purple mist, and that mist was constantly drilling into Sun Abayo's nostrils. Li Xian was no fool and immediately understood the reason. It seemed that after Hongzhu drank that bottle of medicine, she had once again used her charm technique to control Sun Abayo. This was an opportunity that Hongzhu had fought for with great difficulty. Li Xian knew that she could not hesitate and immediately struggled to her feet. Taking advantage of the fact that Sun Abayo had fallen into an illusion and was unaware, she limped towards the wooden house where Lin was imprisoned. After all, Hongzhu had never said how long she could control Sun Abayo for. Right now, he could only seize every second and save Lin and Lu Shuangshuang as soon as possible. Lin. How are you? Wake up. Li Xian walked into the wooden hut and came to Lin's side. She shouted a few words and shook her body. In the end, Lin was still lying there motionless with her eyes closed. She was still unconscious. Li Xian furrowed her brows. She did not care too much and quickly used her yuan qi to sever the shackles that bound Lin Kuo. With great difficulty, she helped her up and moved her to the outside of the wooden hut to lean against before walking towards the other wooden hut. Shuang Shuang, Lu Shuang Shuang, where are you? After looking around the other wooden hut for a long time, Li Xian could not find any trace of Lu Shuang Shuang. The entire wooden hut was only so big and completely empty. Let alone a person, there was not even the shadow of a ghost. Moreover, this wooden hut had been rammed by Sun Abayo before and was already on the verge of collapse. From time to time, it would creak and crack, as if it could collapse at any moment. With the situation being so urgent, Li Xian did not dare to stay any longer. She released her divine sense and carefully inspected the entire wooden hut. After confirming that there was no one else around, she turned around and limped out. Boom! Not long after Li Xian left the wooden hut, the entire hut collapsed with a loud rumble, instantly turning into ruins. Li Xian jumped in fright and hurriedly helped Lin up. When she turned around, she saw that Hongzhu was still standing in the same spot, her face covered in sweat. The purple mist surrounding her was gradually decreasing, and Sun Abayo was still hugging a log and frantically plowing the land. Enduring the pain in her leg, Li Xian walked to Hongzhu's side and whispered, "Big sister Hongzhu, I've already rescued Lin, but I couldn't find Lu Shuang Shuang even after searching through both huts. I'm guessing that she's already been moved." Hongzhu gave a slight nod and quickly circulated her mental cultivation method, pouring all the purple mist surrounding her into Sun Abayo's body in one go. Then, as if her entire body had collapsed, her legs went soft and she directly sat on the ground. Her lips and eyelids were no longer purple and had returned to their normal color. "Big sister Hongzhu. What's wrong?" Li Xian turned pale with fright. She hastily stretched out her empty hand and tried to help Hongzhu up from the ground. As she supported Hongzhu, Li Xian could feel that Hongzhu's body was limp and powerless, as if his entire body had been sucked dry. I'm fine. Let's hurry up and leave this place. My charm technique won't last much longer." Hongzhu weakly waved his hand, took out a restorative pill, stuffed it into his mouth, and swallowed it as he panted. "All right. Let's go." Li Xian did not dare to be negligent. She supported Lin with one hand and Hongzhu with the other, enduring the pain in her leg as she staggered along the path they had come from. However, they had only taken a few steps when Li Xian suddenly sensed an abnormally evil aura gradually approaching her position. Moreover, that aura was extremely oppressive and was much stronger than Sun Abayo's. Li Xian judged that this person should be an extremely high-level evil cultivator expert. If they continued forward, they would definitely run into that evil cultivator expert. Li Xian and her group had basically lost all their fighting strength and would definitely not be able to defeat that evil cultivator. However, if they retreated, they would run into that scum Sun Abayo who was diligently plowing the land. There was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. What should they do? Li Xian immediately began to panic. "Go, that way." Hongzhu forced himself to raise his hand and pointed towards the depths of the forest before he weakly closed his eyes. Li Xian stamped her foot, gritted her teeth, and supported the two girls as they turned around and walked deeper into the forest. At the same time, she continued to release her divine sense to observe the movements of that evil cultivator expert, wanting to see if he would chase after them. After walking for an unknown period of time, Li Xian could clearly feel that the yuan qi in her body was rapidly depleting due to the continuous release of her divine sense. Fortunately, that evil cultivator expert was not heading in their direction. It seemed that he had yet to discover any traces of them. After walking for a while more, Li Xian felt that the vitality in her body was about to be completely exhausted, while Hongzhu and Lin Kuo were still unconscious. Just as she was about to be unable to hold on any longer, she suddenly noticed a hollow tree hole from the corner of her eye. With a thought, she immediately brought the two girls with her and dove into it. Chapter 1193. As soon as she got into the tree hole, Xiaofan's vision went black and she couldn't see anything. She stepped on a thick layer of rotten leaves. Her legs suddenly weakened and she fell to the ground. The two women she was holding also fell heavily. At this time, Xiaofan's vitality was finally completely exhausted. After she fell, she fainted directly without saying a word. For a moment, there were three unconscious beauties lying on the ground. In this dark and damp tree hole, it formed a unique scene. The evil master that Xiaofan sensed was West Mountain Elder. When he returned to his residence, he found that Sun Abayo was standing outside naked, holding a big wood in his hand and working hard. Not far away, one of the two wooden houses had collapsed, and the door of the other was wide open. He suddenly realized the seriousness of the matter. Sun Abayo. Wake the F***ck up. Seeing Sun Abayo looking at the wood with an intoxicated face, West Mountain Elder was so angry that he immediately operated his mental cultivation method, roared, and kicked him. Sun Abayo was still immersed in the wonderful illusion. When he suddenly heard this familiar roar, he was immediately scared witless. Then, he was kicked so hard that he rolled down from the log. Look at what you have done. I told you to go and catch people, but why are you hugging a piece of wood? West Mountain Elder slapped him and said angrily, hurry up and put on your clothes, what a waste. Ouch, don't hit master. I'll put on my clothes, I'll put them on now. Sun Abayo was so scared that he shivered. He quickly picked up the clothes on the ground and put them on. He looked around in confusion. What's going on? Wasn't he having fun with that slut just now? How did she disappear in the blink of an eye? What's the situation with the wood on the ground? Glancing at Sun Abayo, who was at a loss, West Mountain Elder angrily ran to the only remaining wooden house to take a look. When he found that there was no one inside, he couldn't help but get even angrier. He turned around and slapped Sun Abayo's face again, and roared fiercely, where is she? Where's the girl you caught just now? I don't know. Wasn't he here just now? Sun Abayo spun on the spot after being hit, but he did not dare to complain. Clutching his head, he hurriedly ran into the wooden house, only to discover that Lin Kur had indeed disappeared without a trace. From the looks of it, she should have been rescued by those two girls. Tell me, you brainless idiot, what else can you do? If you can't even keep an eye on a little girl, how am I going to explain this to the elders of the upper peaks? Elder Xiaofan angrily pointed at Sun Abayo's nose and scolded. If it weren't for the fact that this guy still had some value, he would have already slapped this idiot to death. Master, I'm sorry. It's all because of a moment of carelessness that I fell for that little hussy's trick. Sun Abayo lowered his head in fear and said, don't be angry. I promise it won't happen again. Please forgive me this time. Humph. If you didn't have the ability to sense spiritual energy, do you think you would still be alive today? You really can't do anything, but you're good at spoiling things. Elder Xiaofan's anger hadn't subsided, and he scolded a few more times. Sun Abayo listened obediently until Elder Xiaofan finally stopped. He asked carefully, Master, what are we going to do next? Elder Xiaofan snorted coldly, frowned and said, hurry up and pack up. We can't stay in this place any longer. Otherwise, both of us won't have a good time. Sun Abayo nodded repeatedly and quickly packed up the luggage in the cabin. Then, he burned the cabin to ashes with a fire. Staring at the dim fire, Sun Abayo couldn't help but recall the scene of being chased before. He subconsciously shivered. About a year ago, a martial arts expert suddenly appeared in the secular world. He was so powerful that he almost killed all the evil cultivators in Songning City. His strength was so high that no evil cultivator in the secular world was a match for him. They were killed until they couldn't fight back. Elder Xiaofan and son Abayo couldn't escape the master's eagle eyes. The two of them were chased like stray dogs. They were extremely embarrassed. It was not easy for them to escape. Although they were lucky to save their lives, both of them were also seriously injured. Through the layers of connections in the inner martial arts world, Elder Xiaofan finally inquired about the master's information. It turned out that it was Song Qingshu of the inner martial arts world Song family. He didn't know why he suddenly came to the secular world to kill evil cultivators. Although there were rules in the inner martial arts world that one couldn't interfere in the disputes of the secular world, evil cultivators were not included. Therefore, Song Qingshu's actions were not stopped by anyone. Elder Xiaofan, who learned of this situation, became more cautious. He took son Abayo to hide in the deep mountains and forests for a few months, taking the opportunity to heal. Recently, he gradually recovered and began to carry out the task of the upper peak again. In fact, the task assigned to Elder Xiaofan was very simple. It was to find a woman with spiritual energy in the secular world. As for why the upper peak had such a need, Elder Xiaofan naturally didn't dare to ask. In short, the upper peak had clearly promised that as long as he could find the person, the upper peak would provide him with enough cultivation resources and all kinds of treasures. In the beginning, Elder Xiaofan was still worried about how he could find a woman with spiritual energy. However, later, he accidentally discovered that his disciple, son Abayo, actually had the ability to sense whether a woman had spiritual energy or not. Elder Xiaofan speculated that it might be because son Abayo hid in the women's toilet all year round, so he was more sensitive to the smell of women. However, son Abayo's ability was not strong. He could only judge whether a woman had spiritual energy after getting close to her. Therefore, Elder Xiaofan originally planned to use Lu Shuangshuang's body as a mobile furnace before son Abayo, so that he could sense suitable candidates in Songning City. Unexpectedly, he didn't expect that Lu Shuangshuang would accidentally lose her virginity to Xiao Chen. When her body was broken, the furnace in Lu Shuangshuang's body was also destroyed. Elder Xiaofan had no choice but to activate the backup plan and let son Abayo go out to sense the woman with spiritual energy. As a result, Elder Xiaofan never expected that they only had time to catch Lu Shuangshuang. During the second operation, son Abayo was actually discovered. Not only did the other party discover son Abayo, but they also deliberately came to the door. Although son Abayo was spared, Elder Xiaofan estimated that it would not be long before the inner martial arts world would send more masters to encircle and annihilate the evil cultivators. In such a bad situation, Elder Xiaofan had to use the 36 stratagems again, which was to run away. Chapter 1194. Ugh. In the dim tree hole, Li Xianer let out a low moan and opened her eyes in a daze. After a while, Li Xianer gradually recalled what had happened and hurriedly raised her head to look at Kerlin beside her. She discovered that she was still unconscious while Hongzhu was sitting cross-legged on the ground, adjusting his breathing. It seemed that he had woken up long ago. "You're awake?" Hongzhu finished adjusting his breathing and exhaled a mouthful of impure air. He looked at Li Xianer and helplessly smiled bitterly. "It was fortunate that you were there last night. Otherwise, with my strength alone, would not have been able to contend against that evil cultivator, much less successfully rescue Kerlin." "Last night? What time is it now?" Li Xianer was slightly startled. She sat up and discovered that the sky outside the tree hole was gradually brightening. Li Xianer silently calculated the time. She did not expect that she had actually been unconscious for several hours. Looking at Hongzhu's pale complexion, Li Xianer shook her head and said, "Actually, you don't need to thank me. If you hadn't used, drag that scum away, I'm afraid that I would have already been violated by him." "Hee, it's nothing." Hongzhu smiled faintly, then suddenly remembered something and asked, "Right, when we left last night, I remember that you didn't seem to want to go out of the forest, as if there was some danger up ahead, so I told you to go deeper into the forest. Afterwards, I fainted. Did you notice anything at that time?" Recalling last night's encounter, Li Xianer nodded with lingering fear and said, "When I took you to escape, I sensed another evil master coming in our direction from outside the forest. That master's strength was far above that scumbag. I guess it was his master or companion, so I didn't dare to go forward. So that's how it was. It seems that we really underestimated our enemy." Hongzhu could not help sighing in relief. Fortunately, that Sun Abayo was quite lustful, so his willpower was not strong enough, which was why he fell for my charm technique. I'm guessing that he should have collapsed and died by now. For some reason, Hongzhu suddenly thought of Xiaofan at this moment. He was the first person who had been able to remain clear-headed under the full force of his charm technique. But, he remembered that he was only a low-level cultivator at that time, so how could he have such strong willpower and mental strength? Don't mention that scum. Just thinking about it makes me sick. Li Xianer pursed her lips and looked down to check her wound. She found that it had already formed a scab, so it probably wouldn't be a big problem. Turning her head, Li Xianer nudged Lin Kuo, attempting to wake her up. However, there was still no movement from her. Li Xianer said in astonishment, "This is really strange. How could Lin Kuo be unconscious for such a long time? Did that scum drug her? I'm not too sure about that. Before you woke up, I gave her a medicinal pill, but in the end, she still didn't wake up." Hongzhu's thoughts were interrupted, and he shook his head faintly. She didn't know much about heretics, so she could only use normal medical skills to treat Kerlin, but it didn't seem to work. "Let me try. I don't believe that no matter how powerful those evil cultivators are, they can't be more powerful than our five-element sect." Li Xianer operated her mental cultivation method, and just when she was about to pour her true qi into Kerlin's body, she was suddenly surprised to find that she had actually leveled up. Li Xianer was originally at the peak of the 9th level of the qi refining stage, but now she had the strength of the consummate stage. She didn't expect that her cultivation, which hadn't increased for a long time, would unexpectedly break through in such a desperate situation yesterday. However, being happy was just being happy. Li Xianer immediately restrained her mind, and planned to wake up Kerlin first. Reaching out to grab Kerlin's wrist, Li Xianer held her breath, and slowly transferred her true qi into her body. At the same time, she also checked whether Kerlin was injured or not. After a round of inspection, Li Xianer felt relieved. Kerlin didn't have any major problems. She was just hit by Sun Abayo's evil technique, so there was a black fog in her head, which was constantly affecting her brain nerves. That was why she was unconscious for such a long time. Li Xianer operated her true qi, and guided the black fog out of her body. When the black fog was completely expelled, Kerlin's eyelids moved slightly, and she woke up not long after. Blinking her eyes in bewilderment, Lin Kuo suddenly leapt up. "Save! Save me! Dad! Mom! There's a bad guy who broke into my room. Ouch!" Kerlin jumped 3 feet high, and her head directly hit the top of the tree hole. The impact made her see stars, and she was in so much pain that tears almost flowed out of her eyes. "I say, Kerlin, aren't you being a little too dramatic? You didn't even look at your surroundings, and just shouted at the top of your lungs. What if you attracted the enemy?" Li Xianer said snappily, "Don't worry. Sister Hongzhu has already killed that scumbag. Also, my eardrums are about to burst because of you." Miss Hongzhu, Miss Li Xianer, how did you? What is this place?" Kerlin rubbed her head with tears in her eyes, and only then did she remember to look at her surroundings. After surveying her surroundings, Lin Kuo discovered that this unfamiliar place was not her own room. Instead, it seemed to be some kind of tree hole. Just what kind of situation was this? "Aya, you were captured by a heretic cultivator earlier. Sister Hongzhu and I risked our lives to save you from the hands of the heretic cultivator with great difficulty, but then an even more powerful heretic cultivator came. We couldn't defeat him, so we had no choice but to escape. Now, we can only hide here for a while. Li Xianer spread her hands and explained helplessly. So that's how it is. Lin had heard Lu Shuangshuang mention a few things about the martial arts world, and she also knew that heretic cultivators were bad people, so she was not surprised. She only timidly said with gratitude, "I didn't expect that you and Miss Hongzhu would be willing to take such a huge risk to save me. We've only just met. I really don't know how to thank you." "It's nothing. Although it took a lot of effort, we were still rescued." Hongzhu waved her hand, sighed, and said, "It's a pity that we couldn't find Lu Shuangshuang, otherwise this trip would have been perfect." "Ah. Shuangshuang was also captured by them?" Lin was greatly shocked, and then asked with some bewilderment, "But Shuangshuang and I are just ordinary people, why would the heretic cultivators want to capture us? If you were really an ordinary person, we wouldn't have to spend so much effort to protect you." Li Xianer couldn't help but blurt out, "Actually, you." Halfway through her words, Li Xianer suddenly stopped, not knowing whether she should tell the truth to Lin. If she told her, would she be able to accept it? Chapter 1195. Unable to come up with a solution, Li Xianer could only cast a pleading look at Hongzhu. "Actually what? Is there something different about me?" Lin couldn't help but feel a little curious when she heard Li Xianer's words and asked weakly. Let me talk to Lin." Hongzhu nodded at Li Xianer, then bent his back and walked over to Lin Ke's side. Holding her hand, he said, "Ke, you may not have heard what I'm about to say before, but don't be too surprised. I won't lie to you." "Oh." Lin Ke obediently nodded, her face filled with anticipation as she looked at Hongzhu. Hongzhu sorted out his thoughts and said, "Li Xianer and I are both martial artists. This time, we received a mission from our clan to come to the secular world to find a woman with spiritual qi in her body. Lu Shuangshuang originally met the requirements, so we contacted her. However, before we could confirm it, she was captured by an evil cultivator. Later on, we discovered that you were also a suitable candidate. We were worried that you would encounter the same situation as Lu Shuangshuang, so we secretly protected you." I have spiritual qi in my body? But why can't I feel it?" Lin asked in astonishment after listening to the story. She thought to herself, "These two girls aren't deliberately making up a story to trick me, are they? But they don't look like bad people." Hongzhu smiled and patiently explained, "Haha, this is very normal. Only some cultivators with special abilities are able to sense spiritual energy. For example, me and that evil cultivator kid who captured you earlier. At any rate, this is a relatively special ability. Li Xian doesn't have it. You are also the same." "This, really? Then why am I not as strong as a cultivator, or can use all kinds of strange skills?" Lin still hadn't dispelled her doubts and asked with a face full of doubt. In fact, Lin had always had a desire in her heart. Although she had never told anyone about it, she had always desired to become a powerful cultivator. If she became a cultivator, not only could she avoid being bullied by others, but she could also go to the warrior guild to take on missions. She once heard from Lu Shuangshuang that some cultivators could take on simple missions in the guild, such as running errands or delivering letters, and they could earn tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands. In this way, not only could he relieve the financial burden of his family, but he would also not have to worry about not being able to find a job after he graduated from university. He had heard that it was very difficult for university students to find a job. If he could become a cultivator, then the problem of finding a job would be easily solved. Although Lin wasn't like Lu Shuangshuang who fantasized about becoming a super-powerful legendary cultivator like her idol, Yang Ming, she also had a small goal in her heart. Lin hoped that as long as she could become as strong as Xiao Chen, she would be satisfied. In Songning City, the reputation of the White Fox swordsman was like thunder to the ears. Many cultivators had named the White Fox swordsman as their idol. There were even many female cultivators who clamored every day to give birth to a little fox for the white fox swordsman. Lin knew that the white fox swordsman was Xiaofan, but she had never told anyone about it. She didn't know how Xiaofan was doing recently. It seemed that she hadn't heard from him for a long time. What has he been doing recently? That's right. Shouldn't he be married to the daughter of the Cheng family? But, why didn't he go back to the morning market to sell breakfast? She had seen a back view similar to Xiaofan several times, but in the end, she realized that she had been mistaken. Kuer, it seems that you've confused the concepts of spiritual energy and cultivators. While Lin's eyes were empty and her thoughts were running wild, Hongzhu shook his head with a faint smile and said, although there is spiritual energy in your body, you haven't gone through any systematic training. You also don't know how to use spiritual energy. Naturally, you can't become a cultivator. Is that so? Lin collected her thoughts and said with some disappointment, it seems that I still can't become a cultivator, let me finish what I have to say. Hongzhu continued with a smile, you don't need to be too discouraged. As long as there is a suitable opportunity to stimulate the spiritual energy in your body, perhaps you can become an even more valiant expert. Lin's eyes lit up and she blurted out, really? Miss Hongzhu isn't lying to me, right? According to what you're saying, I can also become an expert like Xiao. White Fox Swordsman. Oh, you know White Fox Swordsman? Hongzhu was stunned for a moment. He carefully looked at Lin a few times and suddenly remembered that he had seen Xiaofan's information before. This Lin seems to be the person Xiaofan used to like. Thinking of the photo in the information, and then looking at the flustered and innocent Lin in front of him, Hongzhu could immediately determine that it was her. He had never thought that by a freak combination of factors, he would unexpectedly find a girl who was related to Xiaofan. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? I don't know him, because White Fox Swordsman is quite famous in Songning City, and Shuang and I have talked about him before, so I remembered him. Lin was startled and waved her hands in panic, her eyes flickering. For some unknown reason, Lin didn't want to expose Xiaofan's identity in front of others, so she subconsciously covered it up. Oh, so that's how it is. Hongzhu could naturally see that Lin was lying, but he was too lazy to expose her, so he changed the topic and said, White Fox Swordsman is indeed very powerful, but as long as you are willing to make some sacrifices, you might be even stronger than him. Stronger than White Fox Swordsman? Can I really become such an expert? Lin was startled and asked with a blank expression on her face. According to her understanding, Xiaofan was already a very powerful existence. According to what Miss Hongzhu said, could she be more powerful than Xiaofan? What kind of existence was that? Of course you can, Hongzhu nodded and said, in fact, you have an excellent opportunity right now. I have a bit of strength and can help you become a super expert, but there is a precondition to becoming an expert, and that is, you must first complete a mission. Mission? What mission? Lin was even more confused. Could it be that after completing the mission, she would become more powerful than Xiaofan? Could it be that easy? Before I introduce the mission, I must first make one thing clear to you. Hongzhu's expression turned solemn as he earnestly said, this mission may endanger your life. Of course, you have the right to choose not to accept it, and I will not force you. Chapter 1196. My life is in danger. Lin's entire body shook as she shrank back in fear. Could it be that I might die? How frightening. If it was as Miss Hongzhu had said, that I might have to pay with my life in order to become a super expert, wasn't that a little too extreme? In fact, she didn't have a particularly big ambition. She just wanted to live an ordinary life. Although she sometimes fantasized that she would suddenly become a powerful master one day, it was only in her nightmares and fantasies. Now that Lin knew that she had a chance to turn her fantasies into reality, but there was also the possibility of losing her life, the naturally timid Lin immediately thought of retreating. This idea was far too frightening and she did not even have the courage to try it. Miss Ku, you don't have to choose whether to agree or refuse right now. You can go back and think about it for a few days. Seeing Lin Ku's hesitation, Hongzhu smiled faintly and said, however, there isn't much time left for you, because I still need to find other suitable candidates. I hope that you can give me a reply as soon as possible. Seeing Lin's timid appearance, Hongzhu did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. After all, no one had ever attempted the sacrifice before and no one could say for sure whether they would lose their life. Thus, the participants needed to have sufficient awareness. Lin frantically raised her head to look at Hongzhu before turning to look at Li Xian'er. Lin suddenly noticed that there was a huge scar on Li Xian'er's leg. Judging from the fresh scabs and the bloodstains around it, it was most likely the wound she had received last night when she was rescuing her. Seeing this, Lin felt that she was being a little selfish. If Hongzhu and Li Xian had not risked their lives to save her, she would have lost her life long ago. What was the point of talking about life and ideals? Since they have shown me kindness, it is only normal for me to repay them. Besides, Hongzhu had just explained that I have a chance to become a top expert, but there is also a chance that I might lose my life. Even so, there is still a 50% chance, right? It is much better than being captured by the evil cultivators and then tortured to death. Lin pondered for a moment and took a deep breath. Just as she was about to answer, she suddenly thought of something and said, that. I still have a question, what problem? As long as I can answer it, I will definitely tell you, Hongzhu said in a slightly surprised tone. If I leave with you, what will happen to my parents? Lin bit her lower lip and asked in a low voice, if I don't come back, who will take care of them in the future? My father's leg is still injured, and my mother has suffered for her whole life to support the whole family. I can't just leave them like this, right? Lin's heart ached at the thought of her parents' hard work, and her eyes reddened. Don't worry, we will give your parents a lot of money, enough for them to live out their old age. Li Xian'er thought for a while and added, in addition to these, if you have any other conditions, feel free to raise them. As long as they are not too harsh, we will satisfy them one by one. Hongzhu also felt a little helpless. Although she could understand Lin's concern, she could not think of any other way to make up for it other than money. After all, as long as Lin agreed to the ceremony, her life would be in danger. Then, all right. I will agree to your conditions. Having obtained Hongzhu's promise, Lin no longer had any misgivings and simply nodded, saying, but before that, can I go see my parents one more time? I want to say goodbye to them. In truth, Lin did not care about large sums of money or great strength, but she was a girl who knew how to repay kindness. Hongzhu and Li Xian'er had saved her life, so she had agreed. You agree? Hongzhu was in a daze for a good while before he confirmed it with an incredulous look on his face. Hongzhu had originally thought that Lin would need some time to consider it, and had even been prepared to find someone else if Lin refused. He had never imagined that she would be so straightforward. Tell me about the specific details of the mission, I'm still a little confused. Lin forced a smile. Hongzhu looked at the confused Lin and was still a little worried in his heart, so he gave her a brief introduction of the relationship between the internal martial world's immortal cultivation sects and the ghost cultivation sects, as well as the immortal cultivation world. Then, he explained to Lin that the opening of the immortal cultivation world required a woman with spiritual qi in her body to carry out the ceremony, as well as the dangers of the ceremony. Li Xian'er also stared blankly at Lin from the side. Although this little girl looked a little pure and naive, she should not be the kind of girl who did not have her own thoughts, right? Why did she suddenly become so straightforward? There's no need to think any further. After I go back and see my parents, I can go with you. Lin pursed her lips and said softly. With regards to Hongzhu's explanation, Lin did not really understand it, but after weighing the pros and cons, she still decided to go with Hongzhu to participate in the ceremony. There was no doubt that the gratitude of her parents for raising her was irreplaceable, but a person must know how to repay a debt of gratitude. Hongzhu and Li Xian'er's life-saving grace was also very important to Lin. From Lin's point of view, since her life had been saved by Hongzhu and Li Xian'er, she must repay them. As for the hardships her parents had endured to raise her, she could only repay them with the things that Hongzhu had promised her. If she had the chance to return in the future, she would repay them even more. Alright, since you've agreed, let's set off now, lest we waste time. Hongzhu stared at Lin and sighed inwardly. In order to open the immortal cultivation world and obtain the rich treasures and cultivation resources inside, who knew how many happy families would have to be broken up? Doing this, was it really appropriate? Although compared to the evil cultivators of the ghost cultivation sect, the methods of the immortal cultivation sect seemed more humane. At least they would explain clearly and let people consider whether they wanted to participate in the ceremony, unlike the ghost cultivation sect who would directly rob them. But from another point of view, there was not much difference between the two. Both were sacrificing the lives of others in order to obtain certain things and obtain their own benefits. After escorting Lin back to Shantytown, Hongzhu saw from afar that there were many policemen standing near her house. There were also many police cars parked there, filling the entire road. It was probably because Lin's parents had discovered that their daughter was missing that they had called the police. Chapter 1197. Lin wanted to go straight over and explain the situation to her parents, but just as she took a step forward, she stopped. She thought about it carefully. If she did this, she might bring a lot of trouble to Hongzhu and Li Xian'er. When she went to the police station or was questioned by her parents, it would inevitably cause a lot of trouble. After thinking about it for a while, Lin did not continue to walk forward. Instead, she looked at her parents from a distance and silently apologized to them in her heart. It was not until the police officers left that she nodded to Hongzhu. "You are leaving just like that? Is this really okay?" Li Xian'er asked in a low voice. "Don't you want to go and say goodbye to your parents? After all, after you go with us to the inner martial arts world, maybe, you won't have the chance to come back." Hongzhu was also a little stunned. He thought that Lin would go and explain the situation, but he didn't expect that she would just hide in the distance and quietly look at them. "Hee, you don't know my parents' temper. If they know that I am going to participate in such a dangerous ceremony, it is very likely that they won't let me go. I don't want to trouble you, after all, I have already promised you." Lin shook her head and explained. Lin Ku'er was very sensible. After all, she had lived with her parents for so many years, and had long understood their characters. Thus, she was able to guess their reactions accurately. "How about this? After you go back to the inner martial arts world and settle down, you write a letter to them. I will send someone to quietly send the letter and money to your home." Hongzhu gently patted Lin's shoulder and comforted her. "Don't worry, I will seriously ask my subordinates to take good care of your parents in the future. I will never let them suffer. After you successfully complete the task, you can come back and reunite with them." "Well, thank you, Sister Hongzhu." Lin timidly but gratefully looked at Hongzhu. Thinking that she would soon be separated from her parents, perhaps forever, her eyes couldn't help but become a little moist. Her throat seemed to be choked with something, as if tears would fall as soon as she opened her mouth. But Lin knew that this was her own decision, and she could not blame anyone else. So she could only silently wipe away her tears and take one last deep look at her elderly parents. Then, she resolutely turned around and left Shantytown with Hongzhu and Li Xian'er. Lin's mother seemed to have sensed something. She suddenly raised her head and looked in the direction they had left in for a long time, but she could not see anything. "What's wrong? Have you seen Ku'er?" Lin's father also limped out of the house, squinting his eyes as he gazed into the distance. No. Sigh, I don't know where that damned girl went. It's really worrying. Mother Lin sighed and shook her head sadly. He had a fiery temper and often scolded his daughter. Now that Kuer had suddenly disappeared, he was worried about her personal gains and losses. Don't think about it. Our Ku is blessed by the heavens. She will definitely be fine. Father Lin softly coughed a few times and returned to the house with Mother Lin, leaving behind only two hunched backs. Lin and her party had not gone far when Hong Zhu's cell phone rang. She took out her cell phone and looked at it. Seeing that it was a call from one of Hong Ying's subordinates, Xiaofan, she pressed the answer button. Lord Hong Ying, are you still in Songning City? Patriarch Hong has a new task for you. Xiaofan said respectfully from the other end of the phone. Yes, I'm here. What task? Tell me. Hong Zhu answered, but he was a little puzzled in his heart. Could it be that Patriarch Grandpa doesn't know that I'm looking for a woman with spiritual energy? Why would he assign me another task at this time? It's like this. Do you still remember Xiaofei, the auctioneer of the Hong Chamber of Commerce? She is currently lurking in Songning City. Old Patriarch Hong wants you to invite her back before you return, Xiaofan reported in full detail. Senior Sister Xiaofei? Hong Zhu raised his eyebrows in astonishment. Soon after, he asked, why is Patriarch Grandpa looking for her? Is he asking her to do something? This. I'm not too sure. I'm only responsible for conveying Patriarch Hong's orders. It's not appropriate for me to ask too many questions. I hope Lord Hongying can understand. Xiaofan stammered for a while before replying apologetically. Forget it, it has nothing to do with you. Just give me her contact information. Although Hong Zhu was puzzled, he did not think too much about it. In any case, Patriarch Grandpa would definitely not harm him. Alright, I'll immediately send you Xiaofei's address. You can directly go to her house to find her. After saying that, Xiaofan immediately sent a text message to Hong Zhu, which recorded Xiaofei's specific address. Yes, I've received it. That's all. Hong Zhu hung up and looked at the text message. After memorizing the address, he deleted the message. Although Hong Zhu was still a little puzzled, he still gave a simple explanation to Lin and Li Xian, before hurrying over to Xiaofei's residence. That night, outside a large villa in the eastern suburbs of Songshan, two pitch-black figures were silently lurking in the lush greenery. Four bright eyes stared straight at the villa without blinking, as if they were planning something. Ah Biao, are you sure there's a woman with spiritual energy in this villa? Don't get it wrong again. Elder Shishan narrowed his eyes as he looked at the slender figure reflected in the villa's window. Master, there's definitely no problem this time. I originally wanted to make a move, but this villa district is often patrolled by security guards. I was afraid that I'd get into trouble if I was discovered, so I went to capture Lu Shuangshuang and Lin first. I planned to capture this girl last. Sun Abayo hurriedly nodded. Originally, Sun Abayo wouldn't come to a high-class place like this villa district. After all, there were often security guards patrolling here, and the people who lived here were all rich and powerful. There might even be cultivators among them. If he acted rashly, it was very likely that he'd offend some important people, and he might even be hunted down by the warrior guild. Sun Abayo was able to discover this woman with spiritual energy by chance. Once, when he was walking on the street, he suddenly saw a mature woman wearing a cheongsam. Her body was hot, and she was full of charm. Compared to the young and inexperienced female students, she was more appealing. He was instantly attracted to her to the point that his soul almost left his body. In a trance, Sun Abayo secretly followed the mature woman, wanting to take a few more glances at her. In the end, he accidentally discovered that there was a trace of spiritual energy in her body. Perhaps because she had lost her virginity, the mature woman's spiritual energy was relatively weak. Sun Abayo also only discovered it after following her for a while. However, compared to other ordinary women, this trace of spiritual energy was already very rare. Chapter 1198. Sun Abayo paid attention and quietly followed her to the villa area. However, because the security of the villa area was relatively tight, and there were too many unknown risks, he didn't make a move immediately. Instead, he silently remembered the place where the royal sister lived and planned to go back and make a long-term plan. According to the original plan, as long as Sun Abayo could successfully catch Kerlin and Lu Shuangshuang, he didn't need to come here to take risks. However, he didn't expect that Kerlin would be rescued, so West Mountain Elder couldn't complete the task given by the higher-ups. In desperation, Sun Abayo could only bring West Mountain Elder to this place, wanting to catch this beautiful young woman as a substitute. Abayo, the people who live here are either rich or noble. According to my experience, they usually hire cultivators as bodyguards. We have to be very careful when we make a move. If the target is too difficult to handle, then we can only choose to give up. Saving our lives is the most important thing, do you understand? West Mountain Elder warned in a low voice. In the past, West Mountain Elder wouldn't personally deal with things related to catching people. He would leave it to Sun Abayo to deal with it. However, because of Sun Abayo's negligence, Kerlin was rescued, and he lost the shelter that he had found with great difficulty. So West Mountain Elder was a little worried, so he simply followed them. Okay, Master, I have already studied it. After those security guards patrol far away, we can make a move. Sun Abayo pointed to the security guards not far away and said. He had waited a few times before and had already figured out the security guards' patrol pattern. Although they could directly kill all the security guards, it was easy to make the matter bigger and not easy to clean up, so Sun Abayo didn't plan to do that. Besides that little girl, is there anyone else living in this villa? West Mountain Elder asked cautiously. No, she lives alone in the villa. Usually, there are very few people who come to find her. Even if there is, it is in the morning, and they leave not long after. At this time, I have never seen any guests visit. Sun Abayo replied immediately. Elder Xiaofan nodded in satisfaction. Seeing that the security guards were getting further and further away, he felt that the time was right. He gave Sun Abayo a look, and the two of them immediately used their movement techniques to sneak towards the target villa. Elder Xiaofan calmly came to the door of the villa and knocked on the door. Sun Abayo hid in the bushes next to the door, vigilantly observing the movements in the surroundings in case someone suddenly appeared. Dong dong dong. Who are you? Really? After a while, a lazy female voice came from the villa. The voice sounded a little angry. She had probably fallen asleep and was woken up by the knocking on the door. Sorry to disturb you. I'm from the villa's property management office. I'm here for a routine inspection of the sewer pipes. Could you please open the door? In order to make his voice sound less hoarse and deep, Elder Xiaofan deliberately raised his voice by an octave. Sewer pipe? What's there to check? There's no problem with my sewer, so there's no need for a routine inspection. The female voice came again. It sounded a little clearer than before. She should have walked out of the room and was approaching the door. I'm sorry, we're just doing things according to the rules. If we don't check, we'll deduct your salary. Please cooperate. In fact, it's just a casual inspection. It won't take up much of your time. Elder Xiaofan said patiently. Although his words were polite, Elder Xiaofan had already cursed the woman in the villa several times in his heart. He had never spoken to anyone in such a humble manner before. So annoying. Wait a moment, I'll come to open the door after I get dressed. The woman said impatiently. However, even if she was a little impatient, her voice was still charming and intoxicating, causing Sun Abayo in the bushes to be in a trance. After a while, Elder Xishan heard a soft footstep approaching, so he secretly prepared himself. He planned to wait for the woman to open the door and directly grab her away. Creak dash, the door opened, and Elder Xishan stretched out his hand like lightning. However, before he could touch the woman, he felt a sharp force suddenly hit him in the face. F***ck. Elder Xishan cursed. Fortunately, his reaction was quick. He quickly circulated his mental cultivation method and resisted for a while. However, he was still pushed several meters away by the sudden force. Elder Xishan screamed and fell heavily in the garden outside the villa. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. "Do you really think I'm a fool?" As the door gradually opened, a cold female voice came out. "Don't you know that before the property management people come to inspect, they will first call the owner to confirm whether the owner is at home, and then they will visit?" As soon as the voice fell, a noble and charming young woman came out. Perhaps because she dressed in a hurry, the style of her clothes was simple, but the material was obviously very expensive. She looked like a rich lady who had lived in a boudoir for a long time. However, at this time, the body of the rich woman exuded an extremely powerful demonic aura, which was very different from her image. Elder Xishan and Sun Abayo immediately judged that this woman was actually a devil general great perfection expert. "Master! How are you?" Sun Abayo was almost dumbfounded. He couldn't care about hiding anymore. He quickly ran over and helped Elder Xishan up. Then, he turned to look at the rich woman with a face of fear. "Hee, I really didn't expect that there are still evil cultivators in Songning City. It seems that Song Qingshu didn't do her best before. She couldn't clean up all of you rats." The coquettish rich woman laughed softly and walked slowly in the direction of Elder Xishan. Her every move exuded a fatal temptation. Who are you? How do you know Song Qingshu?" Elder Xishan's voice was hoarse as he looked at the young woman uneasily. He thought that it was not good. He didn't expect that he would run into the muzzle of someone else's gun this time. "You don't have to worry about this." The rich woman stretched out her hand and admired her fingers. She smiled as if she was talking about a trivial matter. "It doesn't matter. Although I'm not as strong as Song Qingshu, it's more than enough to kill the two of you." Under Sun Abayo's fearful gaze, the rich woman slowly raised her hand. However, just as she raised it halfway, she suddenly paused and turned to look outside. Messy footsteps sounded. She saw 3 figures rushing toward her villa not far away. When they got closer, she realized that they were all women, and one of them looked a little familiar. Chapter 1199. However, only a handful of people knew the inside story. Even the head of the Xia family, Xia Chaonan, was kept in the dark. Ahem, senior sister Xiaofan, don't make fun of them. Look at how scared they are. Don't you see that there are 2 heretic cultivators here? Hongzhu helplessly rolled his eyes at Xiaofan, before turning his head to explain to the dumbstruck Lin Kuer and Li Xian, "Don't mind her. Senior sister Xiaofei's personality is usually like this. There's nothing wrong with her sexual orientation. She just likes to tease pretty little girls, that's all. This is also a way for her to cultivate her charm techniques." However, Xiaofei's identity as an immortal cultivator could not be revealed, so when the Xia family was in trouble, she could only watch from the sidelines. The reason why Xiaofan did not stay in a martial arts sect and ran to the secular world to hide in the Xia family as a young miss was because of her special physique. After she was discovered, she also became a member of an immortal cultivator sect. However, she was usually assigned to the secular world to secretly manage the Hong Chamber of Commerce's auction house business. "Oh, hello, little sisters. Let me introduce myself. I'm Xiaofan, Hongzhu's senior sister. You all look very young, so you can just call me Sister Xiaofan." He. Xiaofan smiled coquettishly. Xiao Chen had interacted with Xiaofan several times and did not notice any flaws. He only vaguely felt that the auctioneer, Xiaofan, was somewhat familiar during the Spring Festival auction in the outer martial arts world. However, due to the series of events that followed, he had forgotten about her. Trash, you're already at death's door, yet you're still so arrogant. Since you're not willing to talk, there's no point in keeping you alive. Hongzhu smiled coldly and said mercilessly. Even so, Xiaofan secretly felt lucky. The older heretic cultivator's strength seemed to be about the same as hers. If she had not taken the initiative to launch a sneak attack and gained the upper hand, she might have had to put in a lot of effort. Good girl. Xiaofan nodded with a smile. Suddenly, she reached out and pinched Kerlin's cheek. This little girl is quite cute. She looks very likable. However, this little nun is also not bad. Junior sister Hongzhu, where did you find these two exquisite little beauties? Shut up. Without waiting for Sun Abayo to finish speaking, Elder Xiaofan forcefully interrupted him. Then, while secretly circulating his mental cultivation method, he sneered and said, "Hee, don't waste your efforts. Lu Shuangshuang has already been taken away by people from the inner Wulin. If you want to save her, go to the inner Wulin and try to find people from the ghost cultivation sect." As for the other two, they were much slower. Kerlin was not a cultivator at all, and her physique was also not very good. After running a few dozen meters, she was already gasping for breath and her face was pale, completely unable to keep up with Hongzhu's pace. But to use seduction techniques on women, wasn't that a little too exaggerated? Aren't seduction techniques usually used on men? Could it be that concubine Xia's seduction technique was unique? Alright, since junior sister Hongzhu is getting anxious, let's stop chatting and discuss how we should deal with these two evil cultivators. Xiaofan gently spread out her hand. Her fingers were as slender as green onions. She smiled and said, "In any case, they are no different from dead people in my eyes." "Oh, it's nothing. Hello, big sister Xiaofan." Kerlin didn't know much about seduction techniques, but she didn't dare to ask too many questions. She bowed to concubine Xia once again and cautiously said, "Senior sister Xiaofan, you must not be too careless. These two evil cultivators are very powerful. Don't fall into their trap." Hongzhu's strength was relatively high, so she quickly ran to Sun Abayo's side and vigilantly looked at Sun Abayo and old man Xishan. She had wanted to ask about Lu Shuangshuang's whereabouts, but she was only trying her luck. Since she couldn't succeed now, there was no need to let these two people live any longer. In fact, during the auction, concubine Xia had already linked Xiao Chen to great hero White Fox. However, she didn't expose Xiao Chen's identity. After all, she was also a cultivator lurking in the secular world. As long as Xiao Chen didn't interfere with her matters, she wouldn't go and ruin his business. If Xiao Chen was here, he would probably be even more shocked. He didn't expect that the Xia family's resentful daughter, concubine Xia, was actually a devil general perfection stage expert. "Don't kill them yet, I still have something to ask them." Hongzhu waved his hand and slowly walked up to the two. He looked down at the trembling Sun Abayo and asked with a frown, "I'll give you a chance now. As long as you honestly tell me Lu Shuangshuang's whereabouts, I can spare your and your master's lives and hand you over to the Cultivators Association to deal with. If you refuse to speak, you will naturally know what will happen to you." Li Xian also wanted to quickly run over, but after seeing the situation, she could only carefully support Kerlin and slowly bring her to the front of the villa. Carefully bypassing old man Xishan and Sun Abayo, she arrived at Xiaofan and Hongzhu's side. After standing still, Li Xian quietly injected a trace of yuan qi into Kerlin's body to help her relieve her weary state. "Hello, elder sister Xiaofan." Kerlin and Li Xian exchanged a glance and obediently greeted her. Junior sister Hongzhu has come. Why do you suddenly have the time to come play with elder sister?" And who are these two beautiful girls? Xiaofan did not seem surprised. Instead, she stretched her waist, revealing the beautiful curves of her body. She gave off the feeling of someone who had just woken up, then casually brushed her hair behind her ear and asked in a slow voice. It's a long story. I'll explain it to you later. Hongzhu smiled and waved his hand. He pointed at the two girls and introduced them. These two are my friends. This is Li Xian, a disciple of the Five Elements sect. That's why she's wearing a Taoist nun robe. As for that very pure-looking girl, her name is Kerlin. She's just an ordinary student. Don't think that just because you're from a cultivation sect, you're going to cry when you meet the experts of our internal martial arts world. Old man Xiaofan did not show the slightest trace of fear as he laughed mockingly. Sun Abayo had long since pissed his pants. If old man Xiaofan was not injured, he might still have some room to resist. But in the current situation, he could only be at the mercy of others. Upon hearing Hongzhu's question, he immediately nodded and said, Thank you, heroine. Lu Shuangshuang is, Li Xian, and Kerlin were startled by Xiaofei's words. They were at a loss as to what to do. Why did Xiaofei speak so strangely? She couldn't possibly like women, right? Li Xian had a look of sudden realization. She thought to herself, no wonder Xiaofei looked so similar to Hongzhu. It turns out that both of them are using charm techniques. No wonder they're fellow disciples. Li Xian secretly sized up Xiaofei. She felt that this woman's every movement was extremely flirtatious. In some moments, she was quite similar to Hongzhu. She just couldn't remember which moment it was. Chapter 1200. Hongzhu was too lazy to pay any attention to him. She turned her head and smiled sweetly at Xiaofei. Senior sister Xiaofei, I'll have to trouble you to get rid of these two scum. In any case, the question I wanted to ask is all ready. Be careful. Before Sun Abayo's words fell, Xiaofei saw old man Xiaofan suddenly stand up from behind her and push Sun Abayo far away. Then, with a shake of his body, a black mist spread out from his body. His entire skin turned red as he ferociously pounced towards Sun Abayo. Boom! With a loud explosion, old man Xiaofan's body instantly exploded, black blood and pieces of his corpse splattering everywhere. Although Xiaofei had warned Hongzhu in time to stay away, Hongzhu's shoulders and thighs were still stained with a lot of black blood. In just a breath's time, the black blood had completely corroded the clothes it touched and even burned Hongzhu's skin. It was obvious how powerful the poison was. If Hongzhu had not heard Xiaofei's cry of alarm and quickly ran a few steps forward to get away from the center of the explosion, it would not have been as simple as having his clothes and skin burned. The consequences would have been unimaginable. He might have even been instantly corroded into a pile of bones. Taking advantage of the fact that Hongzhu and Xiaofei were still in a state of shock, Sun Abayo, who had been pushed far away by West Mountain Old Man, hastily stood up and scrambled away. He did not even dare to look at Hongzhu's fair and alluring skin after his clothes were corroded. Sun Abayo planned to leave Songning City overnight after his escape. He did not dare to stay here any longer. Right now, he could only think of a way to contact the higher-ups of the ghost cultivation sect in the inner martial arts world and then make further plans. Xiaofei and the others were no longer in the mood to chase after Sun Abayo. Instead, they gathered around Hongzhu and looked at her worriedly. Ouch, it hurts. That old thing is simply too ruthless. He actually used such a vicious move. Fortunately, my legs are nimble, otherwise I might have really died here today. Hongzhu felt a burning sensation on the skin on her shoulders and thighs. The pain was so great that she grimaced and sucked in a breath of cold air. Hongzhu looked down and saw that the black blood seemed to have a life of its own as it continued to corrode her skin. The originally small wound was gradually expanding, making it look extremely terrifying. As she stared at the ghastly wounds on Hongzhu's body, Lin Kuo was quite frightened as tears welled up in her eyes. So it turns out that in order to become a cultivator, one had to pay such a painful price. How terrifying. That was scary. Scared just like that? You're too timid. Sooner or later, you'll experience this pain. Just treat it as an internship now. It's good to get used to it in advance. Otherwise, when the time comes, you won't be able to make the correct judgment and only know how to cry. Li Xianer patted Lin's shoulder gently, like an elder teaching a junior, and said meaningfully. Lin took a deep breath, barely managing to raise the corners of her mouth and wipe away her tears. In any case, it was too late for regrets now. Since she had already chosen to agree to Hongzhu's request, she should keep her promise. Alright, you guys don't nag here anymore. Hongzhu, come with me. Xiaofan anxiously grabbed Hongzhu's hand and led her into the villa, still muttering, hurry up and come with me to my room. Your wounds don't look serious, but I must immediately apply some ointment to stop the poison from spreading. Otherwise, if the black blood corrodes into your bones, things will become troublesome. Busy until late into the night, Xiaofan finally managed to clean Hongzhu's wounds with great difficulty, removing all the black blood that had stained his skin. Then, she gently applied some healing ointment to Hongzhu's wounds and used a medical bandage to bandage the wounds. Only then did she breathe a big sigh of relief. After she finished bandaging the wounds, Hongzhu tried to move his shoulders and thighs. Although there was still a slight stinging pain, it was not as severe as before. He could not help but tease her with a smile, "Senior Sister Xiaofan, I didn't think that you would be so skilled at bandaging wounds. It seems that you usually tend to your man's wounds, right? Alright, don't mention that man to me. He and I are just sacrificial pawns in the marriage between our two families. We've already divorced. Don't tell me you still don't know about this." Xiaofan waved her hand and casually said. It's still the same. How boring. Hongzhu curled his lips as he leaned back on the sofa in the room. Hongzhu and Xiaofan chatted while Li Xianer and Lin sat to the side, almost not saying a word. It was not that they couldn't find a topic to intervene in, but rather, they were a little dumbfounded looking at these two different women. Xiaofan was relatively older, but her bearing was more mature. Her arms were like lotus roots, and her figure was beautiful. Every move she made was filled with a deep temptation. Li Xianer also discovered that Xiaofan did not use her charm technique on other women, but rather that the charm technique she practiced had penetrated deep into her bones. Usually, no matter what she did, she would exude a seductive charm. If Xiaofan was said to be a plump and juicy peach, then Hongzhu was a sparkling and translucent cherry. Her every movement made people feel very comfortable. Her smile and words always carried a kind of moving aura, making people unable to help but recall their beautiful youth. Every frown and smile of hers exuded an indescribable charm that attracted the attention of others. With these two beautiful women chatting, Li Xianer and Lin felt that their eyes weren't enough to take in everything. How could they still want to chat with them? Xiaofan didn't care about the two women's unusual behavior and happily said, "Right, it's rare for the two of you to come and play with me. You should accompany me for a while. Recently, I've been walking the dog and playing cards every day. I've been cultivating alone at home, and I'm about to die of boredom. Forget it, I don't dare to stay in the secular world any longer." Hongzhu helplessly shook his head, looked at Xiaofan, and sternly said, "Senior Sister Xiaofan, I believe you've already heard that the sacrificial ceremony to open the cultivation world is about to be held. I've come here on the orders of Grandpa Patriarch to bring you and us back to the Hong family of the inner martial world." After saying that, Hongzhu secretly sighed. It seemed that Grandpa Patriarch was staking everything on this one throw, otherwise he would not have specially sent me to find Senior Sister Xiaofan. What does it have to do with me whether the immortal cultivation world's sacrificial ceremony is held or not? Could it be old Patriarch Hong has found out? Xiaofei's expression changed as she glanced at Hongzhu in astonishment. In fact, Xiaofan was also aware that aside from her identity as a cultivator, there was indeed a little bit of spiritual energy in her body. However, it was very weak, not even 10%. Although she was qualified to participate in the sacrificial ceremony, it would not be of much use and could only be considered as a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Besides Hongzhu, no one else knew that Xiaofan was a woman with spiritual energy. Hongzhu and she were fellow disciples of the same sect and had always had a good relationship. Therefore, when Hongzhu knew that Xiaofan was unwilling to participate in the sacrificial ceremony, he had agreed to help her conceal the truth and arranged for her to live a low-key life in the secular world. Now that the Hong family had suddenly said that they wanted to bring her back, could it be? Chapter 1201. Don't stare at me like that. If I was the one who revealed this matter, do you think you would still be able to live such a leisurely life in the secular world, playing cards and walking your dog every day? Hongzhu's sharp mind naturally saw through Xiaofei's doubts and explained with a wry smile on his face. Xiaofei's expression softened a little, but she still complained gloomily, "I don't mean to suspect you, it's just that after hiding for so many years with great difficulty, I didn't expect to be discovered so suddenly, so I'm a little unhappy." Hongzhu said with a disappointed expression, "In fact, this is also very normal. Although the Hong and Song families are small and obscure families in the inner martial world, they have powerful information channels in the dark. Even if I don't say anything, someone will find out sooner or later. Junior sister Hongzhu, I can also understand what you mean, but, alas." Xiaofan faintly sighed and said no more. Just now, Xiaofan had indeed suspected for a split second that Hongzhu was the one who had leaked the secret to her. However, she very quickly dismissed this thought. After all, Hongzhu was right. With the underground forces of the Hong and Song families out there, no matter how she tried to hide, she would eventually be found. But what? Hey, what do you mean? Could it be that you have fallen in love with that Wang Xiongzhuang for a long time, so you can't bear to return to the inner martial world? Hongzhu asked with great interest as he looked at Xiaofei's hesitant expression, his gossipy heart suddenly surging. Hongzhu remembered that ever since he knew Xiaofan, he had never seen her fall in love with anyone, but looking at her current appearance, it was obvious that she already had someone she liked. "Tch, don't mock me. How could I possibly fancy that useless guy?" Xiaofan rolled her eyes at Hongzhu in annoyance and leaned back on the sofa. "Then what's going on? Tell me honestly, or I won't let you off." Hongzhu asked with a grin. Xiaofan giggled, elegantly crossed her legs and said, "The person I like is a powerful ability user who can kill people invisibly in minutes, and can also control other people's thoughts. He has a great reputation in our Songning city, how could that coward Wang Xiongzhuang compare to him?" Xiaofan felt very proud every time Xiao Chen pretended to be the White Fox swordsman. This was the only reason why she stayed in Songning city. Although Xiao Chen had been missing for a long time, Xiaofan didn't give up. She always believed that Xiao Chen would reappear one day and she would successfully become the daughter-in-law of the Xiao family. Are you talking about the White Fox? No way. How did you hook up with him? You've never told me this before. Hongzhu blurted out in surprise upon hearing this familiar description. As he asked this question, Hongzhu did not forget to cast a glance to the side. The originally dazed Lin was currently clenching her small fists tightly, an extremely nervous expression on her face. However, Consort Xia did not notice Lin Ke's strange behavior, and instead happily nodded her head, as she happily continued, "That's right, that's right. I didn't expect you to have heard of Hero White Fox. Actually, let me tell you, his real identity is the eldest young master of the Xiao family in Songning City, Xiao Chen. But this is no longer a secret. Now, all the warriors in our Songning City worship him as an idol. After all, he is a psychic." Seeing Xiaofan excitedly pulling Hongzhu along and commenting on Xiao Chen and the White Fox swordsman with eyes full of love, Lin felt a little restless. She could clearly feel that Xiaofan had a strong affection for Xiaochen. But she didn't know why, but Lin's heart was a little difficult to accept. It was as if a beloved treasure that should have belonged to her had suddenly been casually taken away by someone else. Cough cough. Senior sister Xiaofan, don't you feel that the atmosphere in this room is a little strange? The more Hongzhu listened, the more embarrassed he became. He quickly coughed a few times and gave Xiaofan a meaningful look. Then, he looked in the direction of Lin. Huh? What's wrong? Xiaofan had finally bumped into a sister from the same sect and was in the middle of a lively conversation when she was suddenly interrupted. She felt a little puzzled in her heart, but she still followed Hongzhu's gaze and saw a nervous and conflicted Lin Kuo. Xiaofan was a few years older than Lin Kuo. Seeing Lin Kuo's girlish demeanor, she only needed to think for a moment to understand the reason. She stood up and gracefully walked to Lin Kuo's side. Sitting next to her, she charmingly laughed and teased, "Kuo Mimi, why do you look so nervous? Is it because the environment here makes you uncomfortable?" No, big sister's place is very good. I'm not uncomfortable." Lin quickly shook her head and denied in a low voice. "Oh? If that's the case, then why do you have this expression?" Xiaofan giggled as she played with Lin's hair. As if suddenly realizing something, she said, "Right, is it because of what I said just now? Could it be, you're also interested in great hero Xiaochen?" I don't know." Lin Kuo didn't know how to refute when her thoughts were exposed. She could only blush as she lowered her head and fiddled with the corner of her clothes. She stammered, not even knowing what she was saying. I didn't expect our little sister Kuo to be so shy. If you like him, then so be it. It's not like it's something shameful. From now on, we're good sisters, so what can't we say? Or are you afraid that I'll eat you up?" Xiaofan lightly pinched Lin's cheek and unscrupulously teased her. Although Li Xian didn't know the ins and outs of the matter, she had more or less understood it. Recalling her experience of catching ghosts with Xiaochen, she couldn't help but be surprised by the taste of these girls. That arrogant boy even had 2 beauties hidden in his house. Who would have thought that there were so many women who liked him here? What was so good about him? Why didn't she notice? Wasn't it just that his strength was slightly higher? Enough, senior sister Xiaofan. Do you think everyone is as bold and unrestrained as you? Hongzhu also couldn't stand it anymore. He simply ran over and pulled Xiaofan away a little. He sat between the two of them, leaving some space for Lin. "What's so bold and unrestrained about it? We're going to sleep together in the future, so why are you afraid of teasing me now?" Xiaofan curled the corner of her mouth and stretched lazily, outlining a breathtaking and perfect curve. "Stop fooling around, I have something to say." Hongzhu wasn't in the mood to joke at this time. With a solemn expression, he said, "Now that we've spoken, I might as well tell you that Xiaochen has most likely been captured by the people of the inner martial arts world." Chapter 1202. What? Xiaochen has been captured? Lin and Xiaofan asked in unison. Lin was so anxious that she stood up. Hongzhu nodded, then continued, "I've brought some people to the Hong clan earlier. Now, I'm using the information network I already have to find a way to find out Xiaochen's whereabouts. If you all can head to the inner martial arts world earlier, perhaps you can help us look for him before the sacrificial ceremony." This. Xiaochen is so powerful, how could he have been captured? Is there a mistake? Lin bit her lower lip and asked in a flustered manner while pulling Hongzhu along. She was thinking about how she could help Xiaochen escape from danger, but she couldn't think of any way. She could only hate herself for being so weak that she couldn't do anything even if she wanted to. "Hongzhu, are you sure that Xiaochen has been captured by the people of the inner martial world?" Xiaofan did not get up and confirmed with Hongzhu again. Although Xiaofan was also very worried about Xiaochen's safety, she was after all a person who had experienced great storms and waves. Her mental fortitude was relatively strong, and she would not easily reveal her emotions. She was also a bit more steady when faced with a problem. I can't be 100% sure right now, but my Honging group has found out an absolutely reliable piece of information. It says that Xiao Chen's father has certainly been controlled by some powerful forces of the inner martial world. Hongzhu shook his head and said in a low voice, so, even if Xiao Chen hasn't been captured, he should be in the inner martial world right now, making preparations to rescue his father. Alright, there's no time to lose, let's set off immediately. Before the sacrificial ceremony begins, we must find Xiao Chen and bring him back safely. Xia Fei immediately got up and walked out of the room with a solemn expression. Hey, where are you going? Hongzhu was startled and subconsciously asked. You guys sit here for a while, I'm going back to my room to tidy up some things, Xia Fei said without looking back and left the room. Hongzhu and Li Xianer exchanged glances, both of them unable to understand the situation. However, all they could do now was wait. Li Xianer pressed the frightened Lin onto the sofa and comforted her softly. Lin, don't worry too much. That Xiao Chen is quite capable. He'll definitely be fine. You know him too? As if he had discovered a new continent, Hongzhu looked at Li Xianer in astonishment and asked, when did this happen? How come I never heard about it? I received a business deal in Lan City and met him there, but we didn't have much interaction. Li Xian panicked and quickly explained, afraid that Lin would misunderstand something. Lin, on the other hand, did not have the time to think too much about it. Instead, she pulled Hongzhu's hand, her expression turning from timid to resolute as she softly said, Elder sister Hongzhu, I want to cultivate, I want to become stronger. I don't want to be protected by others anymore. I also want to protect the people I want to protect. Hongzhu naturally understood the source of Lin's change. He patted her shoulder and was about to speak when they suddenly heard a woman's voice coming from the door. What are you talking about? Let's go. The three of them simultaneously turned their heads to look and saw that Xia Fei had already changed into a well-tailored set of clothes suitable for movement. She was carrying a small suitcase in her hand and looked like she was ready to leave. You've already packed? Hongzhu asked in disbelief as he looked at Xia Fei's attire. Xia Fei suddenly becoming so capable and experienced really surprised Hongzhu. He did not expect that this eldest young mistress, who usually played cards and walked her dog in a leisurely manner, would have already decided to head for the inner martial arts world in less than 10 minutes. Moreover, she had already packed her things. Most importantly, her goal was not to participate in the sacrificial ceremony. Heavens! How could Xiao Chen have such charisma that he could captivate Xia Fei, who had always had her eyes on the top of her head, to the point that she was willing to risk her life for him? This was simply too inconceivable. In fact, Hongzhu did not understand that apart from the fact that she really liked Xiao Chen, Xia Fei was also willing to risk her life because of the various things Xiao Chen had done for the Xia family in the past. This could also be considered as returning the favor on behalf of the Xia family. Although the Xia family had already given Xiao Chen a generous monetary reward, Xia Fei felt that money alone was far from enough. With Xiao Chen's weak strength at the time, he had helped the Xia family clear away such a big trouble. She must do something more for Xiao Chen. Xia Fei believed that even if the head of the Xia family, Xia Chaonan, knew of her thoughts, he would certainly support her in doing so. Well, I'm done packing. If there's nothing else, let's go straight away. Xia Fei smiled sweetly and led the three women to the villa's gate. Then, she tightly locked the entire villa. Hongzhu naturally agreed to Xia Fei's suggestion. Since she was willing to follow him to the Hong family, then his mission in Songning City had come to an end. After all, there were no more spiritual women in Songning City. Hongzhu felt that there was no need to stay any longer. The time for the Immortal Cultivation World sacrificial ceremony was approaching. He had to bring the women back to report on his mission as soon as possible. While Hongzhu and his party left Songning City for the inner martial arts world, on the other side, the Venerable Secret Realm finally opened as scheduled. Early in the morning, experts from various sects had already gathered outside the teleportation array leading to the Venerable Secret Realm. Although there were many people, it was not disorderly. This was because the Venerable Secret Realm Alliance had already divided the different sects areas in advance. All the experts needed to do was to stand in their own areas and wait quietly for the Venerable Secret Realm to open. Not far in front of the crowd stood a tall platform with a row of neatly arranged seats. At this time, many of the higher-ups from various sects had already taken their seats. The higher-ups of the sects who were familiar with each other smiled and exchanged greetings with each other. Below the platform, the elites of the sects were also discussing how to quickly break through and become venerable experts after entering the Venerable Secret Realm. After a while, all the cultivators who were participating in the Venerable Secret Realm had arrived. The seats on the platform were also full. Only the main seat in the middle was empty. It seemed to be the seat reserved for the president of the Venerable Secret Realm Alliance. Xiao Qin stood among the Jia family's group with his arms crossed. He looked relaxed and at ease on the surface, but he secretly spread out his divine sense and gradually extended it in all directions. He wanted to investigate the surrounding situation. After a round of investigation with his divine sense, Xiao Qin discovered that apart from the Awakening Heaven sect and the other two clans, there were a few relatively familiar faces. He did not recognize any of the other groups. Xiao Qin also paid special attention to the Cloud Guide sect. He discovered that Grandma Nanshan was not participating either. Instead, an unfamiliar old man was leading the group. Ling who had originally been full of anticipation, now had a disappointed look on her face. She quietly hid behind Xiao Qin, not letting the people of the Cloud Guide sect discover her. Chapter 1203. Not far away, in the Six Harmonies factions camp, a few middle-aged men were pointing at Xiao Qin's group. From time to time, they would whisper into the ears of an old man with white hair and a youthful complexion. Anyone could tell that they were definitely looking for an opportunity to play some tricks on Xiao Qin's group. Xiao Qin did not even bother to eavesdrop on the petty tricks of such a weak sect. With his current strength, he could even easily kill a martial venerable at the peak of the martial honor realm. Therefore, he was not worried about the Six Directions sect's secret revenge. Just as the people on and below the platform were chatting enthusiastically, a young man suddenly appeared silently in the middle of the platform. Everyone in the square became serious. The people who were discussing in low voices instantly fell silent. They looked at the platform in awe. Obviously, they all knew the person who had just arrived. Many cultivators raised their heads to look at the young man with admiration. Xiao Qin looked around, then raised his head to take a glance and yawned out of boredom. The young man looked ordinary, but he exuded an insufferably arrogant aura. Xiao Qin guessed that he was the president of the Venerable Mystic Realm Alliance. Greetings, elites from various sects and clans. I am the president of the Venerable Secret Realm Alliance, Chou Wanxian. On behalf of all the members of the Venerable Secret Realm Alliance, I welcome you to participate in the trial of the Venerable Secret Realm. Chou Wanxian's eyes slowly swept across the square. His body shook slightly, and he quietly displayed the strength of a martial honor at the peak of the martial honor realm. A majestic pressure was instantly released. Apart from Xiao Qin and the other martial honor at the peak of the martial honor realm, the low-level cultivators all had ugly expressions. They bent their backs slightly, obviously suppressed by Chou Wanxian's pressure. Even a cultivator like Cheng Menjing turned pale from the pressure and could not breathe. Looking at the painful expressions on most people's faces, the corners of Chou Wanxian's mouth curled up slightly. It was as if he enjoyed the feeling of crushing all living beings. After a pause, Chou Wanxian withdrew his pressure and said with satisfaction, I believe all of you are here for one thing, and that is to successfully break through to the martial honor realm. Everyone felt the mountain-like pressure on their bodies disappear, and their expressions instantly relaxed. They heaved a long sigh of relief and nodded randomly. Although it's not forbidden to fight in the Venerable Secret Realm, I'd like to remind all of you to distinguish who's more important. Chou Wanqian's expression turned cold, and he warned, the main purpose of entering the mystic realm is to become a Venerable One. If you don't break through successfully the first time, then the difficulty will gradually increase. I hope you all know what to do. The crowd looked at each other and felt sad. In fact, there were many disciples from the various sects who were still in the Venerable Realm, cultivating hard in order to make a breakthrough. The first thing you have to do after entering the Honorable Realm is to find a suitable place to go into seclusion. Chou Wanqian's face was expressionless as he continued, when the time comes, all you need to do is circulate your cultivation method with all your might, and you'll naturally be able to draw upon the Venerable One's origin power. As for the locations in the secret realm where the Venerable One's origin power can be produced, I've already marked them clearly. Venerable origin power? What the hell is this thing? Xiaofan was slightly taken aback. Although he had read the guidebook to the Venerable Realm during the few days he was waiting for the secret realm to open, this was the first time he had heard of such a term. Xiaofan, don't be so surprised. What venerable origin power? It's just a place with a higher concentration of heaven and earth spiritual qi. If you cultivate in such a place, you'll naturally be able to break through quickly. The elder heaven ancestor suddenly explained disdainfully, giving Xiaofan a fright. He nodded his head in realization and asked curiously, Elder heaven ancestor, how do you know all this? Have you been to the Venerable Realm before? What's so difficult about that? Since ancient times, cultivation has always been done with the help of supreme grade pills or heaven and earth spiritual qi. Since there's no need to take any medicine, then unless you're a special evil cultivator, you'll definitely use heaven and earth spiritual qi. Who said that you have to go in to find out? The elder heaven ancestor said no more after that. Xiaofan recalled that the seclusion locations were all rather remote and far from each other. It was probably because of the uneven distribution of heaven and earth spiritual qi, and to prevent outsiders from disturbing them, the seclusion locations were purposely made this way. Chou Wanqian continued on the stage, of course, not all of the seclusion locations marked in the secret realm are effective. After all, they were marked thousands of years ago, and some of them may have already lost their effectiveness. However, you don't have to worry, every seclusion location is equipped with protective measures. As long as you stand or sit on the seclusion location and circulate your mental cultivation method, the protective measures will be activated. You don't have to worry about outsiders taking advantage of the situation. However, compared to the previous situation, Chou Wanqian's words didn't cause too much of a reaction. No one was surprised. After all, every sect had more or less someone who had passed through the Venerable Realm and became a Venerable. Once they came out, they would naturally bring out the information they knew so that the other disciples in the sect could use it as a reference. Breaking through to the Venerable Realm is the most important thing after entering the secret realm, but it's rare for you to come to the Venerable Realm. If you can successfully break through and still have the leisure to not immediately come out, you might as well take a stroll inside. Chou Wanqian's tone softened and his expression relaxed. Some of the younger disciples were already curling their lips. No matter how big this secret realm was, how big could it be? After breaking through, they naturally had to come out and return to the sect as soon as possible. What was there to stroll around in there? The secret realm is very rich in heaven and earth treasures. I believe everyone will be interested. Chou Wanqian smiled and reminded them, however, on the contrary, there are also many dangers. Many ferocious beasts will suddenly attack you. If you are not careful, even a small ant can kill you. So, I advise you not to be greedy. You must understand the principle of stopping when you're ahead. Hearing the words heaven and earth treasures, the eyes of the disciples who had lost interest immediately lit up. Many of the weaker disciples were calculating in their hearts. If they couldn't successfully break through this time, it seemed like a good idea to get some heaven and earth treasures from the secret realm. At least when they returned, they could hand them over to the sect as a contribution and exchange them for more cultivation resources or status. However, anyone with a bit of brains knew that compared to those so-called heaven and earth treasures, breaking through to the venerable realm was more important. Even if they really wanted to look for heaven and earth treasures, they could only wait until they had broken through.